Hello guys and girls, welcome to what we've been watching thingy for this month, the month of July. Ray Turner is my guest again. Hello Ray.
Hello.
Welcome. Second time for you?
Second time, it's put my cherry in December.
Yeah, so he's back for more. First time was December, so very different season, although the weather hasn't really changed that much, I've got to say. Bit of a chat and hopefully recommend some stuff for you guys or maybe give some thumbs down and tell you not to bother. That's the way it goes.
Well, that's interesting because I think that may happen.
Might happen quite a bit. Let's see.
Might have a controversial one or three.
I will say, just to give you a bit of a taste of mine, weirdly, I've got two movies featuring Kevin Bacon this month, and they're both new movies, which is bizarre because it's if it was 1989, that would be no surprise. But yeah.
Well, we were talking about Footloose the other day, and just how dreadful it is. Just what a dreadful movie.
But he is good in it.
Well, I think that makes it worse, actually, is that Kevin Bacon... You think Kevin Bacon's better than this, really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's always good, normally.
We were John Wayne, so there you go.
Okay, there you go. Favourite of yours.
Not really, no.
I'm teasing.
We both saw, first day of August, we both saw Celia.
July, you mean? We're not quite in August yet.
You're right. This is a pre-recorded show, and yeah, July. I'm sorry. I've been time travelling. Yeah, July. Sorry, first. It was the 1st of July, wasn't it? We watched Celia, which is a film I particularly love and definitely recommend. It's an Australian film. Anne Turner is the director. And what did you think of it? It was your first. Was it your first time watch?
It was. Yeah, coming of age sort of tale. 1950s Australian.
Yeah, but with a bit of a twist.
Yeah, and I saw in the write-up it was sort of influenced by the Alice in Wonderland. That there was a
Celia is obviously an own take.
Yeah, and there was a weird subplot with rabbits as well. So that was
the basic outline. It's set in the 50s in Australia, and there was a rabbit epidemic, which was real. That really happened.
Okay, I was going to ask you that because I wasn't sure.
It's a thing in Australia, isn't it? That they introduced. There was a guy who I think he wanted to breed them to eat. I think, and he took like 12 rabbits to Australia, and rabbits being what they are, within a year there was like 20 million of them or something. It was literally. I mean, not quite literally that, but it wasn't far off that. It was that kind of thing. He took a few rabbits to Australia,
right?
And and they got out, and they bred like rabbits, and
that backfired.
And by the 50s, so they introduced myxomatosis. And I mean, the bit I think is real is that they banned pet rabbits in Australia, which is a big part of the film, isn't it? That this girl gets a rabbit for her birthday. Celia gets a rabbit for her birthday, and then it's banned, and it gets taken away from her. Yeah, and it's horrible. It's just horrible.
It is. Yeah, you really feel sorry for her.
Yeah, it's really gut wrenching.
It's one of those films. Yeah, it gets inside her head. It's a very powerful coming of age film, very authentic in many ways. Partly about the boredom and confusion of being a young girl.
Yeah, that's I think the thing I responded to really. It was very much about how she is basically an innocent person. She's an innocent girl.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose the other subtext of the film, it's not really a subtext, the other plot line of the film is that her neighbours and her grandmother were communist. Her grandmother's a communist. Her neighbours, gets new neighbours who she becomes friends with. So her grandmother dies, grandmother's a communist, and the parents are really kind of slightly ashamed of this, but then some new neighbours move in next door and they're communists, and she befriends them. But because they're communists, nobody will let her play with them, and she doesn't understand why.
Yeah.
So she's got this kind of double thing of she's got this rabbit she loves that she's not allowed to have, and she doesn't understand why. She's got these friends who she's not allowed to be friends with, and she doesn't understand why. And it all kind of unravels at the end, doesn't it? And it's like, but it's basically, I think it's driven by her innocence, which I think is what's really interesting about it. I mean, without giving the ending away, it gets quite dark, but it is driven by the fact that she doesn't understand the world. She's too young. She's about 10, isn't she? 10 or 11. And she's just too young to understand the world. And it just, But I think the other thing I really love about it was so not the way a Hollywood film would do it. You know, it just felt really true, really. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into her imagination, which actually I thought was the least interesting stuff, really, where she sees these kind of creatures following, and that sort of thing. But I found that the least interesting, really, part of it.
Well, yeah, I can see what you mean. I mean, I think that's my only sort of small complaint, is maybe I wanted a bit more of that stuff.
Oh, right, okay.
Just because I do quite like when films portray, like, the vivid imagination of kids, especially when it's like, I don't know, it's like contrasted with the intense real world stuff, because it's almost like they escape into a more fantastical
But this is actually
world,
very terrifying. I mean,
and that becomes troubling. Yeah, I just think maybe they could have done that stuff a bit more, because then it might have set up the ending a bit more.
I suppose that was the point. I suppose it did, because she had this kind of fantasy life based on this kind of slightly... I mean, that was the other thing, wasn't it? This kids' book that they're reading in the class to them, it's bloody terrifying. I mean, it's absolutely shockingly terrifying. And of course, they just accept it because they're kids. But it was like, you can't read that to children. That's terrifying. And so it gives her nightmares and things. And I suppose the point about that is that in a way the nightmares are kind of like as real to her as real life. But yeah, I mean, I just really loved it. It was one of these. I think when I first saw it, it was Australian. It came out late 90s, about the same time as Sweetie, which was Jane Campion's first.
89.
89.
Yeah.
What did I say?
Late 90s.
No, sorry, late 80s.
Yeah,
late
80s.
Yeah, and it came out about the same time as Sweetie, which was Jane Campion's first film.
Right.
And obviously that was getting so much praise, and and everyone was like, Australia's the place, to filmmakers. And I kind of saw them as a double bill.
Okay.
I'm going to digress now, but I actually went to see Sweetie. I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering, it was Sweetie I went to see in a cinema, and there were two screens, and I went into the wrong screen and saw The Vanishing, which the original, not the Hollywood remake, which
Dutch
was just
one,
absolutely also just completely amazing.
That's a great
brilliant
film. Yeah, I love that film.
And then when I finally saw Sweetie, it was a real disappointment, but it was a double bill with Celia. And Celia just blew it away as far as I was concerned. I thought Sweetie was quite nothing, really.
Yeah.
I just found it really boring. Not boring, to be honest, I can barely remember it. I just didn't find it very interesting, though. I didn't find it...
Yeah. And was this at the time, 1989?
It was around the time,
Around
it was, it was probably on the rep circuit, that's why it was a double bill. But they were doing, it might have been a triple bill, I can't remember, but it was, it was Australian, new Australian films
so
made by
it was
women.
on the theme, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, Celia, and I've sort of loved it ever since. And it's one of these films that nobody's heard of. I mean, it didn't, and the director has stopped directing because she didn't get many films made. She's become a novelist, I believe.
Oh right. Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, just a real overlooked masterpiece, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's got a bit of a cult following in recent years because I know.
Because of me.
Yeah, because of
I
you,
have
naturally.
put it out there. And
of course, right, it's all you. I think Mark Kermode might have mentioned it.
Oh, really?
I know it was on the BFI player for a while. I'm not sure if it still is, but...
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think because it's my first time watch, it's probably hard for me to have that kind of feeling just yet, because normally you have to see a film at least 2 or 3 times before you really have that.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean,
for me anyway, in most cases.
Okay, yeah.
I did like it. It's a very good film, but yeah.
I was going to say possibly it's just the fact that when I saw it, it was like I didn't know anything about it. I was there to see a completely different film.
Yeah.
And I'll be in. What the hell? I'll watch this. And so I didn't know anything. I wasn't expecting. I don't know what I was. I wasn't expecting anything. I just was at another film. And
yeah.
Got a feeling. Was it Map of the Human Heart? That's not Australian, is it?
I'm not
I'm
sure.
thinking,
It's
what-
not one I've heard of. If it is,
Oh, see,
but
so-
we both.
so a bit of a
recommend
thumbs
that
up
one.
for Celia.
Thumbs up, yeah. for Celia.
Are we Siskel and Ebert now?
Yeah. Thumbs in the middle.
Yeah,
thumbs,
no, definitely.
Yeah,
I never saw Siskel and Ebert ever.
Yeah. Oh, they're fun. They're fun.
Yeah.
You can find them on YouTube, of course.
So who's going next, me or you?
You can go.
Okay, well, the next film I saw this month, which was... Well, I've done a lot of... As I should say, there's a bit of a theme to this month. I've done a lot of rewatches.
Okay.
Just... I don't know why, really. It just was one of those months. I was just... And... So the first one was Carrie.
Oh, nice. As in the 70s one.
I saw it with my son, who'd never seen it, and he hated it.
Oh, dear.
And I loved it. I mean, I've always loved it.
You should ban him from the house.
I shouldn't ban him from the house. But it's actually funny though, because I hadn't seen it for a while, and it was a very different film to how I remember it, actually.
Yeah.
And I really love the book as well. I mean, I'm a real big fan of the book.
Yeah, I've read the book.
Yeah, and in my mind, it was like, well, the film's nearly as good as the book. And when I saw it again, it was like, oh, it's not actually. But it is good. It is really, really
It's
good.
very good.
And it's. I think it's. I mean, the thing I find about the book and the film is not so much the horror, really, but just the kind of it's heartbreaking. It's really, really heartbreaking, and Sissy Spacek is so good in it, and she's so
amazing.
perfectly cast as well, because she's got that kind of thing of being this kind of ugly duckling who turns into a swan. But she's kind of, she doesn't become Lauren Bacall or something, she becomes Sissy Spacek with a decent haircut, and stuff. And
yeah, and she can sort of play the other side where she's very menacing as well, which, considering she was very young at the time, I think is pretty...
Yeah, was this before Badlands or after? Was it?
Well, it's similar time, isn't it? Because
I mean, she's playing a very similar character.
It might have been a bit after.
So there's that bit when... I'm aware my daughter has never read the book. My daughter's sitting over there, and I don't want to ruin it for her. But the reaction, is it Tommy, the guy who takes her to the prom?
Yes.
And he's the laughing stock of the school because he does it, I think. But then he kind of falls for it, and it's completely believable.
Yeah.
It's like... But the other thing...
And you sort of buy that he wants to do it as well. He's not just doing it because his girlfriend sort of put him up to it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he probably wouldn't have done it if she didn't ask him, but...
Yeah, no, there is a scene where he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
She has to. But the other person who's just amazing in that film is Nancy Allen, who's so nasty.
Yeah.
And she's such a cutesy little sort of,
Yeah.
lovely kind of... but she's so evil in that film. She's just... and she was Brad De Palma's wife, I think, wasn't she?
I don't know, was she?
I think...
Right.
I think she's a bit older than she looked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Interesting.
I think she was. But yeah, I mean, she's so cutesy and sort of innocent looking, but she's so nasty. And then John Travolta turns up in it, and that's where it's sort of like, oh my god, John Travolta's in this film. This is quite weird. And me and my son were laughing about the scene where she kind of persuades him to do what he does. I'm not going to say what it is he does, but she does it whilst but she manages to have a perfectly straightforward conversation with something in her mouth while she's doing it, which just always makes me laugh. But no, it is a great film. I mean, you've obviously seen Carrie.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I did see it at the cinema a few years ago, sort of like around lockdown when we'd come out and they were showing older films.
Oh, I never seen it in the cinema. I've never seen it on telly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's a bit of a classic and a bit of, in that tradition of, like, very sort of grounded, like, horror, which, like, works the horror in around that stuff. Like, it's very, very naturalistic and authentic feeling, and, yeah, just the style of the whole thing, how it has a very, like, dreamlike sort of feel to it at times, and quite painful. But it really catches sort of the awkward puberty kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. and powerful stuff.
And it's actually, I watched The Fury recently as well, not this month, so I can't really
talk about it.
But I think it was Brian De Palma's follow-up to Carrie, and it's got a similar kind of... Have you ever seen it? It's Kirk Douglas and Amy Irving. Very similar, it's kind of similar idea, but it's terrible.
It's terrible.
It's a terrible film.
Okay.
Anyway, this is, again, I didn't watch it this month, but I don't recommend The Fury, but I do recommend Carrie.
Yeah.
If you've never seen it, but actually do read the book. If that's my recommendation really for Carrie, is read the book first, because...
Yeah. Well, see, I did it the other way, because it's just one of those things, so...
Yeah, no, I didn't.
I do like the book, but I might have a preference for the film, but that might just be because of the way round I did it.
It could have been.
And I do love the film, but...
And we didn't mention Piper Laurie, actually, of course, who is the mother.
She's excellent, isn't she?
She's amazing, yeah.
Yeah. So scary. So sinister. Rewatch. And this time I'm sticking in the 80s, and I did a rewatch of Manhunter.
Oh, gosh,
yes, the original Hannibal Lecter film.
Oh, wow, well, yeah, with Brian Cox.
Him played by Brian Cox.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this was just sort of a random rewatch. We were looking for something to watch, and we noticed it was on the iPlayer, and it'd been a while.
It's pretty good, isn't it?
It's excellent. I love this film. I think it is, for me, the best Hannibal Lecter movie. I sort of like it even more than Silence of the Lambs.
Okay, yeah.
So it's based on Red Dragon, of course, the first version of that story. So it focuses on Will Graham, who is like kind of an obsessed, disturbed FBI guy who is in semi-retirement. Basically, he took an early retirement after an intense last assignment, but he is persuaded out of retirement to try and hunt down and help the police catch the Tooth Fairy. So with this, he tries to get the help of Hannibal Lecter, played by Brian Cox, who he caught in the past and is in prison because of him. And so we kind of get that thing that you do a little bit in Silence of Lambs, where we get a smaller role for Hannibal Lecter in this movie, even smaller than in that movie, where he's sort of playing mind games with Will Graham and is secretly having contact with the Tooth Fairy on the outside.
And who plays the Tooth Fairy in this?
It's someone like Tom Newland, who... I know the face, and he has a reputation for playing that kind of character.
Yeah, I'm kind of vaguely picturing him.
Yeah. It's an early Michael Mann film, one of his first films.
I forgot it was Michael Mann.
Oh
my god, I'd forgotten that.
One of his best films.
Better than Heat, actually.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I mean, I like Heat, but I would agree it's better than Heat.
I thought Heat was a bit average, actually.
Yeah.
It's one of those very overrated films, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. But no, this is excellent. I think I really like the slow burn pace into it. I really like the mood and atmosphere and the sense of dread. Because it's got a very sort of distinct, like, prog rock kind of synthy.
Yeah, Iron Butterfly, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's been a really long time.
The use of music is fantastic, and just how he uses it in scenes, and just some of his like stylistic choices. I think you can tell like it sort of has a little bit of a music video sort of feel, but it definitely works within the film. The scenes are like in darkness, like sort of shadowed and what have you, with when they're kind of, or it's kind of like these FBI kind of guys in rooms and discussing things. Right. End of the film, I sort of like the contrast of how he's then out in the open air on the sunny beach with like his family. So it's almost that idea of he escaped the shadows finally, and he can be with his family in sort of the sunlight. And I kind of like that sort of contrast of light and dark. Performances and the pacing. I really like how Will Graham really is so unhinged, and is in a way even more unhinged than the serial killer, who they manage to make you have some sympathy with, bizarrely. And another thing I liked is how you actually don't see the serial killer till about an hour into the film, roughly, because a lot of it till then is like the build-up and stuff and the investigation, and you get the stuff with Lecter.
Yeah, and then they did the opposite to Signs. They did the very white room, don't they? And he's
Yeah.
very sterile, and he's
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I think that's very well done, but then I like that once he is introduced, like the Tooth Fairy, he kind of gets his own sort of plot in a way, and then it's sort of side by side, because they have this stuff with him and a woman who he becomes attracted to, who's played by a young...
Kim Grice.
No, Kim Grice plays the wife of the Will Graham.
Oh, because that's the only other film I've ever seen her in. Was Brazil, and it was like when she came in, it's like, oh, she's from Brazil.
Yeah, I thought she looked familiar.
She didn't ever have a career then. Sorry, I interrupted you.
That's all right. Yeah, no, it's
trying to be clever. Sorry,
it's all right. It's Joan Allen, a young Joan Allen plays the blind gal.
I remember that now. Yeah,
and she's like, I read on the wiki page that apparently she did some research in like the Institute for the Blind to like perfect the role, and she is very good in it. Like, she's very convincing, but you almost get almost like this Beauty and the Beast style sort of subplot between them, which works quite well, because I think it's the idea then, because he's kind of a freak and, you know, sort of disformed and what have you.
Yeah.
He's attracted to her because she has like a disability as well.
It's ringing a bell. I mean, we are talking like probably 30 years.
It's 1986.
I probably saw it around then. I don't think I've seen it since. I do remember Iron Butterfly though, and I remember and I remember, but I did watch the TV series of Hannibal recently.
Yeah,
and they do that story.
Okay,
and yeah, I mean they skip Silence of the Lambs, but they do that. They do Red Dragon, and they do Hannibal, which in the book is Clarice Starling.
Yeah,
but in the TV series, Will Graham TV series, absolutely terrible.
I remember you telling me. Yeah,
just awful. But there's also they did Red Dragon with Edward Norton.
Oh yeah, I still haven't seen it. I heard it was bad.
It was kind of forgettable, really, and more than bad. Okay. It was just.
Was it quite sort of like hammy and over the top?
I don't really remember. I mean, generally, I don't
just forget.
I think I just saw it on TV one night. Because after Hannibal, the film, the Ridley Scott film, it was like...
They started... Yeah, they were turning them out.
Well, it was like, Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter rather than Brian Cox. And because he was good, he was very sinister, but there is something about Brian Cox that, that is just like sort of...
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say, because the Brian Cox performance is like the complete opposite. It's far more restrained than the Hopkins.
And there's something I kind of liked about that.
Yeah.
Would have liked that as... I mean, I like Silence of the Lambs, though. I mean, I do...
It's very good.
And I think I probably prefer it to Manhunter, actually.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would.
Yeah, I mean, it was more popular.
But it's close. I mean, I think they're both excellent.
Yeah, I mean, Jodie Foster was great.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
I remember liking it. And if you get the choice, I said to the camera, if you get the choice of watching Manhunter or the TV series of Hannibal or the film of Red Dragon, go for Hannibal. No,
Manhunter.
Go for Manhunter.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Very good. Yes. So, we both recommend that one, and it might be a good one for you to re-watch at some point.
Well, I don't know if
it is on the iPlayer now. That's where we saw it, yeah.
Oh, right.
We were just searching for stuff, and my mum likes thrillers, so I thought that'd be a good one to go with.
I've just realised you always tell me I'm supposed to say where I saw mine. I saw all of them on DVD.
On DVD, that's
so, or Blu-ray. Another film with Amy Irving in, which was Traffic, with the Steven Soderbergh film.
Oh, okay.
And that again was a rewatch. I did a lot of rewatches. Should I talk about a couple of rewatches all in one go?
Yeah, go on.
Because they're a bit similar. I did Traffic and Zodiac. These were rewatches.
Oh, nice.
And slightly different. I also rewatched Blade Runner 2049.
Okay.
Which is not quite the same. Obviously, but Traffic, it's not really a kind of terribly revered Soderbergh movie, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I was kind of in the mood. I don't know why. I think But Amy Irving's in it. I'd forgotten she's in it. She plays Michael Douglas's wife.
Okay.
And he's obviously, and it's one of these kind of, you know, labyrinthine plot things all about drug smugglers. Have you seen it?
Yeah. A while back, but...
Yeah, I mean, I saw it when it came out, and just don't know why, I just suddenly got the urge to watch it again, and did. And it's a bit sort of, it's sort of that kind of thumbs up. It's not that.
Yeah,
it's not
all
it's
the
not,
way,
it's,
yeah.
It's actually it's very good. I think it's like, you know, I suppose it is what Hollywood does best, which is kind of, you know, kind of proper serious thrillers. Plot isn't really a plot because you've got several strands. You've got sort of Benicio del Toro as a Mexican cop,
Yeah.
who's like, you know, not really corruptible. Whereas every other cop in Mexico,
There you go,
I mean, these are the sort of things it suffers from a little bit. It's like, you know, every cop in Mexico is corrupt except Benicio del Toro, and then Michael Douglas is a you know, anti-drugs politician whose daughter becomes a drug addict, and then Catherine Zeta-Jones is this innocent wife who discovers her husband is a drug dealer and doesn't want to give up the life that she's been, so she becomes, you know, he gets caught. And she's like, oh my God, my husband's a drug dealer. If I want to live this life, I've got to become a drug dealer. And she becomes far more ruthless than her husband ever was. So there's a lot of cliches going on, but it's kind of really enjoyable. And Soderbergh's really good at that sort of thing, isn't he? I mean, you know,
It's quite stylish, isn't it?
yeah, he's very
From what I
stylish.
remember.
He's a very stylish kind of director. And in a way, you know, and Fincher doing Zodiac, he's also a very stylish director, and he also does these kind of Hollywood thrillers really, really well. The thing I really appreciated about Zodiac was, you know, being a true story as well. It was kind of messy. So you had sort of this thing that went on for kind of 12, 15 years or something, this story. And, you know, people drop out of the story. It's like, you know, like people, like there's Anthony Edwards is in it, and halfway through he just said, that's it, you know, I've had enough, I'm going to become a traffic cop or something. And he goes off, and he's like no longer in the film, but he's been a fairly major character up till then, and people die. You know, Robert Downey Jr. halfway through becomes an alcoholic and kind of loses his job, and they gets replaced with it's Adam Greenberg Goldberg.
Oh, I know the
Do
one.
you know who I mean?
I know who you mean.
He was Chandler's mad flatmate in Friends.
Okay.
And he's in all sorts of
I
things.
do know who you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But he's got a really tiny little part, and it's like the only sort of things that are constant throughout the film really are Jake Gyllenhaal's character who wrote the book that the film is based on, and Mark Ruffalo's character who's the cop who didn't give up on the case, who kind of keeps on. But it's a weird one because they never caught him.
Yeah.
I've just given away the ending there.
Oh dear.
Should we cut that? Do you want to cut that?
Well, no, but it is a very notorious story, like true life.
So it's kind of you are left with this kind of, you know, well, everybody seems to think this guy's the killer, but nobody knows for sure. And there's actually a few bits where you kind of go, oh, well, that doesn't fit. He couldn't have been because he did that. But
yeah.
And it's really messy, but I kind of really appreciate that about it, and that kind of worked, I think. And so actually, it's a funny one because I think rewatching Traffic, I kind of went, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't as good as I remember it. Rewatching Zodiac, I kind of went, it's actually better than I remember it, and partly what I liked about it was that it was so messy.
Yeah.
Have you seen them both?
Yeah. I really like Zodiac. I think it's
yeah.
Yeah, they do a good job with the passage of time, because sometimes in a movie it is hard to really sell the amount of time, because obviously there's a limited amount, and you just get this sense of these really sweaty, frustrated guys trying to sort of solve this case.
Yeah, and you've got these other people like Chloe Savini's in it as
yeah, the cast it's really well cast.
Yeah, but she's a tiny little part. You know, it's sort of.
Yeah, there's all sorts of people in there.
Yeah, and you have this guy's marriage. Like, he takes a night off, has his first date. By the end of the film, he's divorced from the woman that he's had a first date with at the beginning of the film. You know,
I think also it's that thing that when like that kind of FBI like type story works really well is when it's able to merge really good horror with like procedural like really well.
Yeah.
Where you're on the edge of your seat, it's very stylish, and you're sort of immersed in what's going on. And I remember as well a really creepy use of hurdy-gurdy.
Well, I was about to
as
say
well.
that. It's like, you've got this kind of hurdy-gurdy man song. It sounds so ominous. It's like, so that was just right at the beginning, isn't it? It's the very first murder.
Yeah.
To this, and it's a strange because he kind of, you think, oh, he's going to kill him, and he doesn't, and then he kind of goes away, and he comes back, and then he kind of botches it, and it's really messy, and it's not this, and it's actually the complete opposite to kind of Hannibal Lecter type of thing. This very clinical,
Yeah,
this
sure.
kind of sort of idea of what a serial killer is, and
Yeah.
Presumably the reality of unhinged people, they're not they're not actually quite as clinical and precise as they are in the movies. I don't know.
Yeah.
Zodiac was definitely a bit of a
Thumbs up. Fan of Zodiac.
yeah.
I saw it in the cinema at the time. I've watched it a couple of times since, and I think it's right up there with Fincher's best films. Really, it's one of his very. It is in that sort of niche area of like this kind of film he does really well, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm probably a bit with you on Traffic, although it's been a while, so I can't say for sure. But
It's
I remember it being solid, but
Yeah, it's
maybe
solid.
not quite as good as it was sort of. Because I think at the time it got a fair bit of praise, but then maybe people have forgotten about it a bit since.
I think for me the biggest problem was that you had this kind of anti-drugs politician, and then his daughter becomes a drug addict. It's just a bit too neat, it's a bit too kind of.
And I know, like, because I remember when it came out at the time, talking to a friend about it, and he was just someone who sort of had experience of that kind of thing, and he just felt, and maybe it's just because it's a film, but like he just felt her addiction just escalated too fast. Like it didn't really seem that realistic.
2049.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Yeah,
I mean, it's if you like Blade Runner, like as much as I do, the first one, it's never going to be as good.
Yeah,
but considering all things considered, it could have been a lot worse. And and it was pretty good. It was it was more than pretty good. It was very good.
It's a worthy sort of sequel.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you didn't like Blade Runner, do you? You don't.
It's not that I don't like it. I find it a bit overrated. So that there's that. But no.
So
I mean, I've only seen 2049 once, and I did like it, but I've not rewatched it. But it was good.
So I've just knocked off 3 films in one go there.
Okay, well, my next one is quite a short one anyway, but there is a sci-fi link to it, and it's actually a documentary. So it's a documentary about Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
And
so I'm in.
You wouldn't know. Well, you know the show, but
I know of it.
You've not seen the documentary or the show.
Yes,
but,
right.
Okay. Okay, so the documentary is called What We Left Behind, looking back at Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So it came out in the last few years. This is on Paramount Plus because they sort of own all the Star Trek stuff.
Okay.
And so it's a documentary from the showrunner of Deep Space Nine. So he gets together basically most of the original cast members from the show, a lot of the writers, a lot of the producers, big talking heads involved. And the point of the documentary is to kind of look at how the show took like 10 years to really become appreciated, to really become accepted as like a popular Star Trek show in the whole Trekverse, because I kind of remember when I mentioned it to you, like your vague memories. Oh, it's set on a space station, and it was a different kind of Trek show.
Oh, that was the right. Yeah, sorry, I'd forgotten.
Yeah, space station near a wormhole. It's, as they say in the documentary, it's a lot more moody. Like one person describes it as like sort of like sci-fi noir type thing.
Okay.
And And so in the documentary you have like the fans, some of the fans talking about it and talking about their early reactions and how they didn't really get into it because of that. Because, yeah, they're not going on missions, they're not going on a spaceship, they're not boldly going to these other places.
Right, yeah.
And so it's partly about that and re-evaluating that and how eventually it did become popular within the Trekverse and with Trek fans, but it did take a while. And so, you know, you've got like talking heads that are, I guess because they've been gathered together by the showrunner, they are very comfortable talking about these things, and you do get some interesting stories. Because one of the other things it talks about is how it was sort of ahead of its time for TV, like at the time, because when you talk about how far forward we move with TV and how progressive it became later, like they sort of say in this documentary that this show didn't really get enough credit for that. Like Cisco was the first African American captain, and because of that you kind of had stories about the kind of like race riots which were going on around the time, and they incorporated that into some of the stories. You had, one of the characters, Kira Nerys, like, one of the comments at one point is about how, in a way, her character today would play more as like a terrorist, but it was very different times, so the character was portrayed in quite a different way. And, yeah, they also talk about how it was a very serialized show, especially for the time, about how it featured like themes of war, like as I said, themes of race. Like there was sort of a transgender style storyline, which at the time would have been kind of progressive. And they also do this thing where, because he gets a bunch of the writers in the writing rooms, and they kind of start pitching ideas for like if there was a season 8 type thing, so just an imaginary type thing. And that stuff is quite good fun, just them saying where the characters would be or that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a bit distracting because you go with the flow and then they'll sort of insert that stuff, but it's quite a fun idea. And I think he did it just to make the documentary feel a bit different. And at one point...
Maybe he's trying to pitch it.
Maybe. At one point, Terry Farrell, who left the show sort of before the last season, mystery over what exactly happened with her. And she is pretty candid in the documentary about how she had a lot of problems with the producers, because she was getting offers to do kind of network style sitcoms, and about how she didn't really want to leave the show, but like her hand was forced a bit. I mean, at one point there's a line about how one of the producers apparently said to her that, you know, you should resign because without the show you would be working at Walmart, which isn't the way to persuade someone to stay. And she actually gets quite emotional in the documentary about it. And I mean, as one of the other cast members said, really we're on the outside, so we don't know what went on in those discussions, so we'll never know the truth. I mean, we support her and we obviously wanted her to stay, but we'll never know the full truth of what happened. But yeah, she's pretty candid about that stuff, and it's a good documentary, you know, if you're a fan of the show.
Record, you said it was quite progressive for the time, which I think the actual original Star Trek was. I mean,
yeah.
Which is really the only one I'm even vaguely familiar with.
Okay.
Pardon me. Yeah, I mean, but I remember wasn't it the first interracial kiss, or interracial, that's...
Yeah, at the time.
At the time,
in the
you know,
60s, yeah.
Uhura,
yeah.
And Kirk, they kissed. And And that was kind of quite risky, I think. It was quite... It was risky in terms of it could alienate an awful lot of the audience, and that's apparently.
Yeah, especially
probably more in America than England, I'm guessing, but I don't know. But
well, it was certainly a massive deal and
was
rare at the time. Yeah.
But then on a sort of more kind of aesthetic level as well, the special effects and things in Star Trek for the '60s for a TV show were really good. I mean, they were as good, if not slightly better, than a lot of what we were getting in cinemas in the '80s.
Sure,
maybe '70s. I mean, they were good. It looked good. That's my memory. That's really all I know about Star Trek. I did watch some of the original series. I don't think I ever saw
any of the other shows.
I would catch bits here and there, but I never actually sat down and watched it. I don't know why. It's just not my thing. It's that thing of TV.
Yeah.
It's that idea of committing to something. It's a bit easier now with like iPlayer and stuff, but back in the day, it was like the idea of committing to being in front of your telly at a certain time every week, no matter what,
Yeah.
Or you'd miss something. I kind of prefer the iPlayer thing where you can kind of box set it. You can watch a whole series in a week. And it's quite an intense thing, but you don't kind of go away and forget what's been happening. But it's interesting with older things. Do they work like that when they weren't? Because I think now things are designed to be like that.
Well, I think so. I mean, I guess if you don't know any different. I mean, sometimes because I review stuff on YouTube, and if I'm doing a TV show, I think for my channel, weekly episodes is better because then there's that anticipation for the next one, and sometimes you get bigger views on that review because it hasn't been all kind of shot out at the same time.
Right.
I mean, obviously, if it's an older one and it's on iPlayer or whatever, that's a bit different anyway. The time probably thought that much about it. It's just the way things were, but I think there is something to that than. I guess in some ways it's just nice to have something to look forward to, like during the week. If you watch an episode, and of course TV was more standalone episodes back then anyway.
Yeah,
so
I
it's very different.
Going to say that. I think that it was. I presume sort of VCRs.
Yeah.
And this sounds very primitive, but it was like I remember. Twin Peaks, for example, was one of the things I remember at least. So it wasn't a mini series; it was a series.
Yeah.
But it was like it didn't. It had a story that was a series long. It wasn't, in fact, 2 series long. It didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't sort of nothing was standalone. If you missed one, that was quite a big deal. And I remember, and I videoed it. I videoed the whole thing on VHS.
Nice.
And got to see it. It meant, I never missed. But I would have done. I mean, I would have missed loads of it had I had it. So I think maybe that probably by that, when was that? It was kind of early 90s, wasn't it? It was like 1991.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so. I don't know when was Deep Space Nine? Did you say?
So it started in like '93.
Right. So you had. So yeah. That kind of. So you had that thing of. They probably realised that people were willing to do that, maybe. Mm-hmm. Whereas, when things like Starsky and Hutch or something were on, or Star Trek, the original stuff, it was like each episode, there was that thing, wasn't there, that, unless something really big happened, you more or less had a kind of reset at the beginning of each
exactly.
At the beginning of each episode.
The point of view of fans at the end of the documentary who appreciate it because it opened so many doors and was progressive and stuff, and almost gave them a voice a little bit, so you do have that by the end.
Amazon Prime,
all these P's.
Yeah. So Amazon Prime, you get Amazon, you get Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
It's 9, is that on there as well?
Yeah.
Right.
They've got all the Treks. I think Netflix do as well for a while until their sort of deal runs out, but...
Oh, okay, so people can watch Deep Space Nine on Netflix?
Yeah, or Amazon.
I'm plugging.
Very good.
I'm doing. You should have another go because I did.
Yeah, I'll do another because mine's Actually, I'll do two more because my next two are both quite short. Okay, so I watched a recent film. I watched a film called The End We Start From, which came out quite recently. It's
Oh, hang on, I think I saw that. Is that the one about the cyber attack?
I don't know if it's the one with Jodie Comer in. Is that the one you're thinking
No,
of? Out
it's
of
not the
Killing Eve? No. Okay.
Um,
Apocalyptic, has a very sort of pandemic vibe, and so it's that kind of setup. And the Jodie Comer character at the start of the film gives birth to a new child, and that's sort of partly what it's about, her anxiety of bringing this child into a world where you've got like, it's to do with like thunderstorms or something, the kind of threat in this movie, but they don't really play into like the threat of it that much, to be honest, but that's kind of what it is. And the drama is about her bringing a child into this world and kind of just her paranoia and worrying that, is she doing the right thing? At one point, like the roads are all closed, like there's different things that happen, like they sort of go on this journey. And yeah, I caught up with it because it's on Netflix now. I know it did come out. It had a small cinema release, but it's on Netflix now. And yeah, I didn't think much of it really. It didn't really grab me. I thought it was a little bit dry, a little bit dull. It didn't really have a lot of style or mood, so it didn't really grab you.
right.
Because I think your hope with this sort of thing is that they're really going to play into kind of the threat, like the post-apocalyptic thing, and that it's going to have quite a mood to it, because I think it's quite low budget, because I know like the BBC produced it, and yeah, it just wasn't that interesting. Like I don't think they made the most of the premise, is what I would say. Like, she's a good actress. I think she's very good.
I've never seen Killing Eve, so I don't know anything about her really. I've heard
She's very good. I mean, this is a different sort of role to that, obviously, but I think you can see why she might be cast in something like this. But yeah, it just wasn't the most compelling film overall. It was kind of like, there's a lot of jumping about, there's a lot of kind of what's in her head, what isn't.
Right.
And yeah, it just wasn't that interesting to watch. Like, I didn't really engage that much with the characters. There's quite a distracting cameo from Benedict Cumberbatch.
I thought you were going to say Kevin Bacon.
Okay, yeah, that's to come later, but yeah, and that's just because he produced the film, so I guess he gave himself a cameo and he's in it in the middle, but it's, it's not terrible, it's worth a watch, it's on Netflix, but I would say it was little bit dull, didn't really grab me, that one. So that's The End We Start From. The greatest bad movies in history, I went with Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oh, fantastic.
Excellent, Edward. So, yeah, this is wonderful. This is gloriously bad, cobbled together movie. And I think it helps having seen the film Edward, the Tim Burton film, because...
Was this a first time watch?
It was, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I think when you've seen that movie, you can kind of identify that, okay, yeah, Burton cast those actors really well, because you can see that's that guy, and they all look very authentic, and there's kind of this shambolic charm to it. There's just all sorts...
Oh, there's definitely shambolic charm.
Absolutely. I mean, there's also... I think the whole thing about someone like Edward is just... Because there's this naivety to him, and there's this wide-eyed innocence, then
yeah,
I think that's why you sort of forgive the film being as bad as it is. Like, there's almost this cult that builds up around this kind of director, because just because of some of the stories, and because he was like a genuine sort of film fan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I saw The Room recently for the first time.
Okay,
I mean, but it had the same sort of idea of, every now and again you see a film that's kind of bad, but you think, it's deliberate. And The Room didn't feel that way. And Ed Wood's films, I don't know if have you seen Glen or Glenda and
no,
any of the others?
No, this is
I mean, they don't feel kind of deliberately bad. It's like these people are trying to make good films. And that's the kind of, that's what's so brilliant about them.
I agree.
I think if they're doing it on purpose, it's not funny.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that there's real passion there. There is actual passion to do something good, and it's just misplaced.
Yeah.
And it's gloriously misplaced.
Yeah. That's how I feel. Like, I think the only way you can do it where you're being kind of ironic about it and nodding, I think you can only do that if you're quite smart with these kind of prestige. It can sort of work then, but as far as like full-on guilty pleasures, I think you have to sort of be in it, and you kind of have to be like, yeah, there is a charm to this because he thinks what he's doing is a good movie, or he's at least hoping it's a good movie, and they're from the heart. I mean, Glenn or Glenda's from the heart. Yeah.
And I think Plan 9, it was, and there was that. It was quite. I mean, I am looking at the film. I mean, I actually saw Plan 9 before I saw the film Ed Wood, and it's when you see Ed Wood, you sort of think, I almost wish I'd seen it the other way around.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying.
Because you sort of think, I don't know. Well, no, I think the way you did it, because you watch Ed Wood and you sort of think, it can't really have been that bad, can it? And then you see the reality and think, it actually is. It is as bad as they made it out.
And there's stuff like, and it's a good one to watch on stream because we had a right laugh at it. But it was like,
it's the guy.
Yeah, and
he's knocking over the gravestones. He says he's walking through the graveyard. He knocks a couple of gravestones.
And the flying saucer looks like a bottle cap, and also you've got the big it's like the Swedish guy who's like a wrestler type thing.
Yes.
And he's walking so slowly towards the police guy. How does he not see him sneak? And the girl in the car's even worse because she's looking straight ahead and she doesn't see him till he leaves bearing. And then there's like they forget lines and it's left in the movie. They get lines. Because, with, that big guy, there's a line where 1 minute...
Is it Tor Johnson or something?
Yeah, because in Ed Wood, he's played by George the Animal Steel, who was, an American wrestler.
Okay,
which is, good casting. But, Yeah, at one... Because at first they call him, the old one, and then they call him the big one in the next bit, and they get it wrong, yeah. So, yeah...
The bit I remember that made me laugh the most, actually, is, there's an awful lot of stock footage used in the film, and there's just this bit where, I can't remember, I think they're firing up flying saucers. You see these flying saucers, and they're like hubcaps, aren't they? And on wires, and they're kind of bobbing around, they're not at all convincing. But then you see these two soldiers, one of them holding binoculars, but there's just a white background. It's like there's no scenery or anything, just a white background. And one of them just goes, and you cut to nuclear bombs going off, artillery, and just stock footage, and then he's like, and it all stops. He literally just does that with his binoculars and starts a war. It's just brilliant. That's the bit that made me laugh the most, I think, when I saw the film. It's kind of just, and it's also
I know the bit.
So emotionless as well.
Yeah.
It's not even. It's it's not even that. It's really kind of, and the aeroplane cabin, just a curtain, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm not even sure presumably they've got a steering wheel, but it's just a curtain. This is the thing with cheap sci-fi. There's a lot of curtains involved. There's a lot of curtains very popular on alien planets. Apparently, it's inside spaceships.
Must be, yeah. I agree. That's what I learnt from this film.
Yeah, but this is just in case people don't know and they haven't seen Ed Wood. The thing about the film, it stars Bela Lugosi, doesn't it? But he was dead. They filmed about 5 minutes of stuff. And then he died, and they recast him with somebody who looked nothing like him. So he walks around with a cloak over his face the whole time. But they reuse all the footage of Bela Lugosi again and again and again and again. So you get the same bit of footage used about 20
Yeah.
times. It is brilliantly kind of daft.
Terrible.
And just
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think that's the best compliment I'll give to it. Like I can't give it. I would give it a minus score, and I think that's what Edward would want. Really, he wouldn't want me to give it a good score.
Do you not think?
No. Well, I'm partly kidding.
The way I first heard about it was, and I was still at, I think I was at secondary school, but I was still at school, and there was a TV show. It was weekly, and it was kind of called something. It wasn't called Guilty Pleasures, but it was called something like So Bad They're Good, and they would put on these movies, but they had a guy who would introduce them, and he'd tell you all the things to look out for. And while you're watching the movie, they would kind of little arrows would appear on the screen, saying, "No, there's a hidden script down here," and the guys would, and notice this guy knocking over a gravestone and that sort of thing. So you'd get all these little pointers to tell you why, which in a way is kind of cheating, because that's the whole point about films, is that you do get away with stuff, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's how I came across it, and it was and I think this was voted. And I can't remember what else they showed, but I remember they showed another film, which I think had Richard Keel in it. The guy who played Jaws. In
Jaws. Yeah.
As a kind of, I think it was him.
Okay.
As a kind of ape man, sort of, who came. I think maybe he was frozen. I can't remember.
Okay.
But it was Plan 9 from Outer Space was the one that everyone remembered.
Sure.
From it, but the interesting thing about these sort of bad movies, they are so bad they're good, they're very funny. But actually, the thing that makes them convincing, I think, the reason is actually big chunks of them are actually quite boring. Which is that's the sort of, and it's the same with The Room. It's like big chunks of it are actually quite boring, which is why you think, I think he's not. I don't think this is fake. Because it would be bad all the time, and I mean, it is bad all the time, but. It's sort of like it's bad in a sort of very repetitive sort of way, and actually it's like the joke wears thin a bit, but then they pick up again. They are definitely worth watching.
And I mean, Plan 9 is such a short movie anyway. It's only about 80 minutes. It might be a bit longer, but it's not very long.
I mean, Glen or Glenda's around. It's perhaps even less.
Okay.
And
I've never seen that one. I'll put that on my list.
And there's another one called the thing about Edward, I believe he ended up making porn really towards the end of his life.
Oh, right. Okay.
He couldn't really get money for his films, and so he started making sort of softcore, I think fairly softcore porn.
Yeah.
Just to sort of be a filmmaker.
Recommended his biography. Said that was very good.
Oh right, not written by him.
No. I'm
as
assuming
as opposed to Waterboat,
yeah, I'm assuming, but
okay.
So I might try and catch up with the biography.
Right, yeah.
Probably loads of fun stories. But
Probably, yes.
Yeah. That's on YouTube, not surprisingly. No surprise, it's on YouTube.
I think I may have that actually.
You might have it, yeah.
And it was, and this is the 3 John Wayne films. I watched John Ford's Cavalry trilogy, John Wayne's Cavalry trilogy, which is Fort Apache, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and Rio Grande.
Okay.
I don't know. It was I sort of been wanting to watch them for a long time. People tell me they're wonderful and everything,
and they're not so.
Well, they're hailed as masterpieces, aren't they? And I always have this thing with John Ford, but I don't get it.
Yeah.
And I'm appealing to anyone who's to tell me what is the thing with John Ford. It's like Ingmar Bergman, I think, said he was the greatest director that ever lived.
Okay.
I'm going to talk more about Ford generally than about these films, actually.
Is
is
that something? Because I know certain. I don't know if it's about Ford so much, but certain like westerns from that sort of era, like I've heard described as like they influenced quite European sort of filmmakers, or at least that maybe they see like a European style in those films.
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe
because his films, I think at least the cinematography is quite sort of like quite rich and sort of.
Well, that's something I was going to talk about.
Okay, go on
It's
then.
literally. What? So okay. So I got as far as Ingmar Bergman, but Orson Welles just claimed he was a genius. Kurosawa, I think.
Right. Okay.
But also people like Spielberg and I mean, obviously,
range of directors.
The Fablemans, has got that scene. Have you seen the Fablemans?
Yeah, not yet.
Have you not seen the?
Is that the one where David Lynch plays in?
David Lynch plays John Ford.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a character in the film who says to this young up and coming film director who is basically Steven Spielberg, but he's John Fableman. I don't know what his first name is, but he's Fableman. It's about this family called the Fablemans, and the son wants to be a filmmaker.
Okay.
And it is, as far as I understand, it's very, very autobiographical.
Okay.
He's just changed the name of the character, but that's kind of it as far as I can tell.
Right, okay.
Even and apparently Spielberg actually met John Ford, and this is a very weird scene. It's not a weird scene, but it's quite a funny scene. But apparently it's actually kind of how it was with John Ford. He was drunk, and so a character says to this kid, do you want to meet the greatest film director that ever lived? And he's like, who do you mean? And they just and he's like, Jesus, it's John Ford. But I kind of watch these films, and I really want somebody to explain it to me, because it's the characterization in all of his films. What's interesting, I think. So let's start with the positive. So you talk about the rich cinematography. I find that when he's filming scenery, so when he films Monument Valley, and I mean, it is amazing. But then I think, but it's bloody Monument Valley. It's not. I don't know. I kind of think it wouldn't be that hard to make it look good.
Yeah.
And he's very good at putting figures into that landscape and showing you the grandeur of it. So there's that. But actually, when he gets characters in a room, find them visually quite bland.
Right. Okay.
And I find the characterizations very, very just flat, very two-dimensional. And I sort of think, well, all these people rave about John Ford. They say he's the greatest. I think Hitchcock said he was and
yeah, it's funny, isn't it?
And I thought, well, what came out roughly the same sort of time as these films? And I did do my film buffery wasn't enough. I had to do it quickly. But one of the films actually, which might come up later, is Rope, for example. Came out roughly the same sort of time as these three films, and there you've got somebody really using the camera, I think, to tell a story, and you've got interesting characters. But the thing about I'm going to forget what I'm going to say. The thing about Ford, I think, is that the script. So certainly for Apache, you've got a very flawed character played by Henry Fonda, deeply, deeply flawed human being who's kind of egotistical general who basically starts a war because he's too egotistical to let it go, almost like a little thing. It's like, and everyone's saying to him, don't do this, and he does it anyway. And then, but he's also very heroic, and the film ends with them sort of praising this guy for being such a hero of the American people. But actually, we've seen that the whole thing has been a complete folly, and that actually he just killed a load of his own men, effectively, and started an unnecessary war with the Apaches.
Okay.
Now, that's not an uninteresting character, I think.
No.
But Ford manages to just kind of, I don't know, to me, just go through the motions of having Henry Fonda just say lines and not really explore what that character's about.
Okay.
And I think, so another film that came out roughly at that sort of time, Sunset Boulevard. And, Billy Wilder does not get anything like the kind of recognition that John Ford gets, I think. I mean, he's recognised as a good director and, classic Hollywood director and all that. But if you look at Sunset Boulevard, I mean, it's packed full of character. Everybody's got motivations. and they're all playing it, but they're not playing it in that kind of, we're all playing our sort of, but with, I mean, the other thing I've got to say about Ford is, these 3 films have John Wayne in, and Victor McLaglen. Victor McLaglen and John Wayne both won Oscars in their careers. But both, I would say, fairly limited actors.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff from Victor McLaglen, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but is funny, at least, intentionally, and it is funny. But basically, just and actually, to be honest, I actually found the films a bit boring.
Yeah.
And I find John Wayne a really boring actor to listen to. Whether I think you can have bad actors, and they're kind of okay to watch somehow, But John Wayne.
But would you say he's got charisma? Because that's obviously
no
fashion sort of movie style.
Well, but clearly he was. He was massively popular.
Yeah, not a fan.
I found all 3 of these. I think if I was going to pick one, Rio Grande. Is it Rio Grande? Rio Grande? I'm not sure. Rio Grande was probably the best.
Grande, yeah.
That's the one I enjoyed the most.
Okay.
It was. I think she wore a yellow ribbon. To be honest, I actually couldn't follow the plot. I was actually, what the hell is... There just seemed to be stuff. They just seemed to be going one place, having a battle, and going back again, and going back again, having another... And I was like, what's going on? Sort of,
okay.
But the other 2, there was, but Rio Grande had a bit of fun about it, and it did have a little bit of... There was this... Again, you've got this thing of John Wayne's son has failed at West. John Wayne's this kind of army. He's a career army guy, and nearing the end of his career, and he's important, and he's a captain or colonel, I'm not sure.
Okay.
And his son got kicked out of West Point and volunteered and finds himself in the same unit as John Wayne, who refuses to kind of show him any favouritism, but secretly and then his mother turns up, who's Maureen O'Hara. And there's this kind of, there's this struggle. But it's in, like I say, it's in the script. There's this struggle of John Wayne's kind of sense of duty to, his whole life has been a soldier, and he's kind of re-falling in love with his wife, and he hasn't seen his son since he was a baby, but he kind of, but it's just not there in the film. It's like you have to kind of go away afterwards and go, that's what... And I think that's not good directing to me. And I don't know. I kind of want to understand why everybody praises Ford.
Yeah.
And doesn't... they do praise Hitchcock, obviously, and Billy Wilder and John Huston and all these people, but
not to the same
extent. And,
right, yeah.
And
also it says something if all these other classic filmmakers are... They're on the bandwagon in a way.
They're all set. So I'm kind of... So that's my thing. So and I would love somebody to kind of really explain it to me, because the nearest anyone got was they said he doesn't film America, he films Americana.
Okay.
But that doesn't seem to be enough. No. It's like, it's... he obviously did films like The Grapes of Wrath and The Quiet Man, which I haven't seen, to be fair. The Grapes of Wrath, and the one thing that I did see that the Ford did, though, which I haven't seen, but it's a film called The Informer, which is the film Victor McLaglen won an Oscar for.
Okay.
And it's about an IRA informer, so it's not a Western, it's an IRA movie. He informs against his comrades, which, I think nowadays would not be seen as quite so, but it was seen as quite a bad thing in this film. It's like the IRA were much more heroic. And so he does it for money. So you've got this theme of, a guy selling out his friends for money. But the film begins with this kind of amazing image of this kind of woman leaning against a lamppost, and she's got a headscarf and she looks really, virginal or Madonna-like.
Okay.
And then it cuts to this kind of toff with a bowler hat, and he kind of just looks at her and cuts back to this virginal woman. She cuts to this man, and he kind of slowly starts to smile, and it's obviously a little bit leering, and this woman just whips her headscarf off and all her hair shoots up, and she just, it's an amazing image because she goes from being this Madonna to being like this whore, and literally that's and it's just, and I kind of, and when I saw that I thought that's what people are talking about when they talk about John Ford being a genius.
Yeah.
And I've looked for it in his, and obviously the end shot of like the Searchers is amazing.
Yeah.
But the Searchers itself, I've never got.
You've said this before. You're not really.
I mean, it's very Sight and Sound. You know, it's one of the 10 top movies of all time. I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it made it this time, but it generally does.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I mean,
I certainly wouldn't have placed it that high.
No, I mean, and you know, I watched it and went, yeah. But actually, it's. I mean, again, it's one of these films where you kind of go, that character is amazing. The Ethan Edwards, John Wayne character.
Yeah.
But I know that but I mean, the other thing that's interesting. So is that again around the same time, films like Red River with John Wayne, Western with John Wayne, and Rio Bravo, and they're both directed by Howard Hawks.
Yeah.
And both much more enjoyable films than any of the kind of the Cavalry trilogy films. So, in my opinion, I have to keep saying in my opinion.
Although I haven't seen as much of his films as you, and I haven't seen those three. So,
have you seen Stagecoach? You've not seen.
No, I haven't seen many. I've seen The Searchers because I watched it for like film class.
Yeah,
and I have seen The Quiet Man, and
I've not seen that.
You know, that one's a bit lighter kind of thing, and it's
apparently
sort of alright.
He made Rio Grande. Yeah, he the guy who funded The Quiet Man, which was Ford's pet project.
Yeah,
said, "I'll fund it, but you have to make a black and white western," and he made Rio Grande.
Okay. Later one I thought like quite sort of quirky. It's obviously in this Irish town.
Yeah, and of course Spielberg in E.T. he uses that clip from The Quiet Man, doesn't he?
Yeah. See, again, I'm similar to you. Like, I wasn't in love with it. It sort of passed the time. It was quite charming for what it was. They were obviously going for a bit of a lighter film, I think, but it was fine. You know, I didn't love it, so maybe I am in a similar sort of.
But somebody out there knows what it is. Tell us. Tell us why we should love John Ford.
We want a light bulb to go.
We do, and I don't. You know, and it's not. I don't know. I like to think I'm kind of broad-minded. I'm not like, oh, it's black and white, it's boring. You know, it's not me. But I think
no, because obviously there's lots of older stuff. Yeah. It's funny, like you say, when so many of like what I considered some of the best filmmakers ever are in the same boat, where they're kind of like, yeah, this guy is the best, almost one of the best.
I'm knocking them out. I'm just ninja film reviewing. It's like 3 in one go.
No problem. Well, okay, so next for me is, it's the first link to Kevin Bacon this month. Have you heard of the X trilogy?
The Triple X film?
No, it has nothing to do with
No, okay, probably not.
Okay, I'll have to do some explaining.
Yeah.
Okay, so this month, Maxine came out, with 3 X's, by the way, so triple X in the middle. So that's the third and final part of this modern horror trilogy.
Oh, my daughter was talking about this. I have not seen it. But
You've got some, Okay, so Ty West did this trilogy of movies. So 2 years ago, you had the first one, which was X, and so the trick with that is it was set in the 70s. And
I've heard of it. Yes.
Yeah,
I've not seen it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, I reviewed it on the channel at the time, but. Set in the 70s, so you've got a group of like filmmakers making a porno movie.
Yes.
So it's a very like sort of Texas Chainsaw style setting, and you've got an old couple who like rent out the barn for them to do that, but they don't realise what they're actually doing. Mm-hmm. And you've
rent out a barn. What kind of movie?
What
kind of porn is
yeah,
it?
yeah, but. It was a good film. It was an interesting film, very stylish, and that sort of spawned this trilogy because the Mia Goth character, who plays the kind of lead in the movie they're making in that first film, the next film, Pearl, she becomes, you see her 40s, so in the kind of Hollywood period of the 40s, so like the kind of, you know, Wizard of Oz style.
So I thought it was set in the 70s.
No, that's the first film. The second film is
set earlier.
Yeah.
Oh right, okay.
But it's not really the same character, because it's.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, sorry, that was a bit misleading. I didn't actually mean it was the same person. In the porno movie, then becomes a real character in the second movie.
Oh, okay.
Basically, so you follow her journey in the second movie. So again, that has a slightly different feel, because it's like a horror movie, but it's set in like the classic era of Hollywood. And then the third movie is that actress trying to make it big in 1980s Hollywood. And it's around about the time of like VHS taking off. And
video nasties and things.
Yeah, and because she's a porn actress, that's like a whole thing in the movie where she's trying to be taken seriously.
Okay.
And there's this gag quite early on where she goes to an audition and she does this speech about how, like, this is the time now for her to be taken seriously. And then in the next instance, like, the casting director says, okay, now take your top off, and she does. And that's kind of the gag kind of thing. But, so it's set in California, LA, in like the 80s. And at the same time as she's trying to get her big break in this movie role, it sort of follows the whole murder spree of the Night Stalker. So there's a murder going on in the background.
Is this a real murderer?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
But the thing about the movie is, I guess a little bit like Tarantino does sometimes, is that's almost like the backdrop, dying around her, like in mysterious ways. So she becomes a suspect, and then there's other people who are suspects. But like, for a while, they kind of think it's the Night Stalker. Very like neo-noir, you know, a bit like the other two had their own kind of style and period. This one sort of has its own style and period. And it's disappointing. You know, because I really like the other two, and this one was easily the weakest. I thought the script was pretty lame. And I think part of the problem was it sort of felt a little bit like a grab bag of like directors and styles which like this director grew up on. And I think there's a little bit of a sense that...
Are they all directed by the same person?
Yeah, Ty West. And there's a bit of a sense then I think maybe he's become... Like, on the back of these other two movies, I think he's become this sort of hip new director, and that maybe... he's got a little bit carried away. But I think one of the big issues is it does feel a little bit like just a grab bag of these other directors. So it definitely feels very sort of derivative of like David Lynch, like his Hollywood movies. So Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway. It has a very like noir sort of vibe in that way. But, you know, without any of, like, the style or, like, the interesting characters that Lynch brings to his movies. It also has a very Brian De Palma feel, so the films he was doing in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, on a theme from earlier, yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, kind of nasty but stylish sort of, like, B-movie thrillers. The other thing is, like, I just felt the Hollywood stuff, because it does get into, like, the stuff where, okay, it's all very sleazy and corrupt, and that stuff had just been there and done it before, and it's not... The jokes are pretty, like, lame, like, there's nothing really that funny, and, yeah, no, it just felt a bit flat, and it was a little bit of a mess, because it couldn't always make up its mind what it wanted to be. Like, because there's moments where it's going for a little bit of a bad taste vibe and a little bit of, yeah, this is kind of over the top, sort of, but kind of sleazy. But then that felt a bit out of tune with, like, the other parts of the movie. So, it's a shame when it's, like, the third part of the trilogy, and I enjoyed the other two movies. Because, to be honest, I probably would watch it again as part of that trilogy because it's, you know, at least I enjoy the other two movies. And yeah, Kevin Bacon is in it in like a...
Is it a big part?
It's fairly big, yeah. He plays like the private detective who's like kind of trying to track her down for her parents because like she's kind of run away from home and been missing for a while. And
Okay.
that's who he is. And I mean, it's a good part, but I mean, he's not really given that much to do. So I mean, it's sort of this thing where, in a way, Kevin Bacon's never bad, but he is kind of underwhelming in this. And maybe that's just the film. Maybe it just feels like people are going through the motions a bit.
I mean, yeah, I think
Like,
sometimes you know, I guess actors do that sometimes, don't they?
yeah, a bit of a letdown, especially after the previous two.
Yeah, I do. I seem to remember wanting to see X because my daughter was quite into it, and
Yeah, X is an interesting movie. Like, it's very well done. It's very well directed, and it's got a nice sort of slow burn feel to it.
Mhm.
But also it's got things to say about religion and also about, yeah, kind of, you know, the way things changed in the 70s. Painted as quite likeable people who are just doing what they want to do in a way, you know, and there's no harm. Because, like, you've got a cast of characters, you've got, like, General Tager's in it. It's one of the crew. As to be in the movie, yeah, and she's presented as this virginal, shy sort of girl, and she's just working on, like, I think her boyfriend's the cameraman or something, so she's kind of working with him. So there's just this whole thing where he doesn't want her to be in the movie because he's getting protective and maybe a little bit jealous, but like, but the other people are saying no, let her, you know, no harm done, that kind of thing.
Right.
And just things like that. You know, that's Maxine anyway, which came out in cinemas recently. I'm tying these together is that they're both from the Beverly Hills Cop franchise.
oh right,
Because there is a new Beverly Hills Cop movie out. It came out this month.
Is that?
Axel F. Great name.
I mean, I haven't.
I'll get to it.
Yeah. By the way, that's,
Oh,
I haven't seen it,
no.
and I don't want to.
Okay, that's right. Well, see, that was my reaction, but you know, in the end, I did it for the channel basically, and
Yeah.
it's obviously one people are going to be interested in. But also, I did the original Beverly Hills Cop movie. I watched that, and there's a theme behind that because this year I am doing some reviews from 1984 movies, and that came out in 1984.
Okay,
so
wow.
40 years exactly.
Oh my god,
Crazy.
that's
Crazy. And yeah, Beverly Hills Cop is, for me, a bit of a classic because I grew up on it, and it's one of those movies, we all have them, where we can kind of quote every line pretty much, and that's one for me. And
Really?
like, the comedy is just so good and so edgy, so fresh.
I've only seen it once.
Seen
and that
it
was
once.
Probably it was a roughly. I think it was probably when it came out on VHS.
Yeah.
And I never saw the sequel. My memory of it is that by far the funniest bit was the bit with Martin Short, which was. Is that the first film?
Do you mean like kind of the...
He's the art dealer. Is
yeah,
that Martin
it's
Short?
not Martin Short, but he does look a bit like him.
At being
Serge.
by right. Okay. Well, that's my memory is.
He was very good.
Hysterically funny.
Yeah.
But I don't
You
remember
didn't
finding the
really
rest of it
find-
that good. I just
okay.
remember not enjoying it very much. I'm finding Eddie Murphy a bit annoying.
Okay. That's
yeah.
fair. I mean, obviously he was in his pomp at this point. The film is produced through his like production company, so yeah.
But that was his kind
a
of
lot
big breakthrough
influence.
movie, wasn't it? I mean, I think.
I think 48 Hours was a bit before.
Yes, it was, but that wasn't such a. There was nothing.
No,
like
but
this
it
big.
was quite a big movie. But so in a way, that was a springboard for him. But like, and that's another thing I was going to say is I think around this time, and I think Beverly Hills Cop is the thing that set off the trend, is these buddy cop style movies, because I think it stands out as also Midnight Run sort of has that vibe, and John Aston's in that, who's in Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah. I'm thinking Lethal Weapon and 48 Hours. I mean, those were the...
Yeah, I mean, they were a bit late. Holds up the way it does is because it seems very hard, especially nowadays, for Hollywood and films in general to do really good kind of like action comedies. Like, that's a very hard thing to pull off. And a lot of times I'll watch a film and it'll start off quite good and you'll get some good gags, but it seems as soon as they introduce the action stuff, it kind of falls a bit flat and it's not really working as well. And there's just a bit of an art to it, in the same way as there's an art to maybe a horror comedy. I think there's an art to doing like in that. And, you know, this one is very sort of slick and stylish, and it's got a really good soundtrack, a really good urban sort of African-American soundtrack.
I'm trying to think who it was. It was Harold Faltermeyer, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it also had like the...
That was a big hit.
Yeah, yeah. Is that like the main, like The Heat Is On? Is that...
He did a... Well,
that's one of the big songs on the sound.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also the Pointer Sisters, Patti LeBon, they're on there.
Well, Harold Faltermeyer did a song called Axel F, which got into the charts.
Yes, yes.
And I can't remember how it goes, but it was a hit. It was a big hit.
Well, that's obviously the main Beverly Hills Cop theme.
Yeah.
So that's the theme you hear a lot, especially if he shows up in the scene.
Go on, hum it, go on.
No,
I didn't think you were actually going to do that.
No, okay. I did my best. It fell flat.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, there you go. There you go. There.
Oh yeah, no,
that's it. That's
oh god!
It. Yeah, yeah.
Wow, suddenly I'm 12 again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always that thing. It's easier when someone else does it, or when you're actually doing it along with the thing. Bits of it that don't hold up, but overall, I think considering it's 40 years old, I think it holds up well.
That's one I probably should give a rewatch. I mean,
it's been a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a film that made almost no impact on me whatsoever, really. But, but I don't know.
I think
it's like sometimes things mellow with you. You know,
yeah.
Like you see it as a teenager, and it's not your sort of thing, and you know, I don't know.
I think it's also that thing of sometimes with films like nostalgia, and the time you see them plays a big part. It's on Amazon Prime,
okay.
But like, yeah, I remember, speaking of like the sequel, I remember having the first two movies both on the same VHS, because it was that era when they started.
I haven't seen. I don't think I've seen the second one. Was it just called Beverly Hills Cop 2? Did it have a title?
Yeah, no, Beverly. Yeah, and it's solid. It's solid. I mean, some people prefer it to the first one. I don't personally, but some people do. Yeah, Axel F is actually not bad. Like, it's better than you expect it to be. They have updated it a little bit. Obviously, you've got a lot of nostalgia in there for the sort of target audience. But the jokes are reasonably funny. The twist they put on it is then you've got his daughter now in the movie, like the Axel Foley's daughter. Mm-hmm. And the twist is that she's a lawyer in the movie. So she's almost the opposite, because that's his whole deal. Even though he's a cop and he's meant to like abide by the law, a lot of times he's bending the rules all the time, and he's very sort of slippery and sneaky. And so that's one of the big gags of the movie, is that she's playing it by the book, and they're working together at some point. They haven't like spoken for like 5 years, and this case sort of brings them together. It's to do with a client that she's defending who's been accused of this thing, and there's a whole kind of stitch up type thing. Kevin Bacon's in it again. He's the villain, very well cast. Yeah, he plays this sort of a similar sort of...
Do we know he's the villain all the way through?
Pretty much. The daughter, I thought, was the strongest stuff, because I did think they had good chemistry, and she was good. Like, I've not really seen the actress in anything. That she's called Taylor Page, but she was good, and I think they had... No, I've not seen her in anything else. Yeah, like I said, they had good chemistry, And I did like how it sort of switched around some of that stuff. So, like, there's a scene, for example, where to try and get information, like, they have to try and get into, like, this sort of prestigious nightclub type thing. And Murphy's, like, so cocky. Like, he tells the daughter to wait in the car. He's like, I've got this. And he goes in, and it's kind of this thing where he's just banking on, like, he's going to bullshit his way into this like, club like he did in the past.
Yeah.
And that's the twist. It doesn't work. Like, they sort of call his bluff. And
presumably he's a 60-year-old man now, is he?
well, I don't know how old he is, but I don't think that makes any difference. I think the point is it's the same old Axel Foley, but like,
Right.
but that's sort of the twist. Is then the daughter comes cruising in, and she uses the law to get them into the club. So that was something I did enjoy. Then they were kind of setting you up for one thing, and then kind of twisting it around, and so I would say it's a decent movie. It's not a fantastic movie. I think like Joseph Gordon-Levitt's in it, and
Oh, right, he's good.
he is good. His character is one of the weaker because I think his character just feels like the character they wanted so that they could do a bit of a buddy cop thing with him and Foley.
Have they not got Judge Reinhold? Whatever his name is?
No, they're both in it.
Oh, okay.
But for plot reasons, Reinhold's character isn't in it that much.
Okay.
And the other character, Taggart, John Aston's character,
I don't remember who he is.
well, he's the other cop from the original movie.
Okay.
But he is now the chief of police, so he's kind of in a different role. So you sort of see them here and there, and I think with his character, again, I won't give away why this is, but like I think maybe there was a missed opportunity where they could have done something quite bold with his character,
Okay.
and in the end they didn't go down that path.
So here's the question: is it funny?
Yeah, I think it's solidly funny. Like, there's enough gags in there to keep you sort of going. Like,
And are the action sequences actually exciting?
the action scenes aren't so great. Like, I think they're the weaker side of the movie. Like they don't bring it together in that way I was talking about, like the action. And, you know, it's kind of a lot of shouting. There's quite an annoying scene with a helicopter. But, you know, it's reasonably good fun. There's some good gags. There's some good twists on things. As I said, he has good chemistry with the daughter. So I think it comes down to expectations, because it's a bit like I was talking about with Maxine. Because I went into that expecting things and then it didn't really deliver, I'm left sort of a bit flat. Whereas I think it was the opposite with this. Like, I didn't...
I can definitely imagine, yeah.
Yeah, I just expected it to be rubbish and another sort of pointless nostalgia sequel. And as it was, I think it sort of did justify its sort of existence. And
Yeah, it's the thing, isn't it? When they make a sequel 40 years or however...
yeah.
Pardon me.
It's
When they make a
okay.
sequel a long, long time after the... You know, when you kind of, you know, somebody was a big star and they made a load of films and their star sort of waned a bit.
Yeah.
And then they kind of make a sequel to the film that made them a star. You kind of go, that's desperate. It smacks a bit of desperation, and it's almost never a good thing. So it's interesting if it's actually, you say, it quite works. And
Yeah, I mean, I think they've just got to put a little bit of a modern twist on it. And I think they do in this. I think there's enough of a modern twist and enough which the original fans will enjoy as well. I think that's the balance you have to get. And, yeah, it's one of these things. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of the recent Indiana Jones film where we both said all it had to be was better than the fourth one. Like, all it had to be was...
I really liked
well,
it.
so did I, but
Yeah,
a lot of
we
people
are in the minority.
We are in the minority. But it's a similar sort of feeling where, in this case, because The third one, the third Beverly Hills Cop, is crap. That is.
I don't think I really saw the third one.
That is a bit of a turkey.
Okay,
That's the one where they go to like a theme park in France, and
okay.
there's a whole gun subplot, but it's rubbish.
Right.
It really is rubbish. So in a way, all it had to be was better than that, and it is. It's the third best Beverly Hills Cop movie, and I'll take that. I think it's gone down reasonably well with fans. From like the reviews I've seen, the sort of target audience seem reasonably happy with it. So
I mean, sorry, on this theme in general, I haven't seen Top Gun Maverick, and the first Top Gun
is good.
Strikes me a little bit as a bit like an Ed Wood movie. It's kind of so bad it's good, almost. It's because it is terrible. It
definitely has that guilty pleasure sort of feel.
But I'm
very cheesy.
I am led to believe that Maverick is actually a better film.
It's a better made film. I think maybe it lacks some of that charm that Top Gun.
Okay, right.
I think that's the difference.
Rope, the Hitchcock film, which is probably it's not a second. It's probably a fourth or fifth time.
Yeah,
but it was my daughter wanted to watch it, and and so we watched it. And it's kind of, I don't know. I'm not sure it's one of his really rated films, is it? It's
doesn't seem to be, no.
But it's really good.
It's really good.
I mean,
I saw it quite recently too.
Yeah, it's. I mean. I think if you talk about Hitchcock, Vertigo and Psycho and North by Northwest and The Birds and I thought watch Rear Window.
But it's probably that than like everyone raves about those, but maybe
and then
they
Strangers
don't.
on a Train and Rebecca. And people, they mention, but what they all mention about Rope is the long take, and some of them I'm thinking. And I think they were added in post production. I mean, there's edits that he tried to hide, but which were planned. But there's actual edits, like sort of where somebody speaks and it cuts to them. There's not many, but there are a few. And I maybe should explain the thing about Rope.
Yeah.
Just in case anyone hasn't seen it, is the idea is it was all shot in a single take, so the whole film is one long camera shot. For about 85 minutes, but because he couldn't get 85 minutes of film in a camera, he had to every 10 minutes or so it sort of tracks into someone's back and then out again or something. It's a bit duff. But there are actual kind of just cuts, just straightforward cuts. Not many, 3 or 4. And I was looking at it thinking, I don't know how they. I assume they were added afterwards by the studios for really clunky, where presumably the camera was tracking. But that aside, and in some ways I kind of want to compare it to the John Ford films, which were roughly the same sort. I think Rope was 48, and the Cavalry trilogy was 48 to 50, so 48, 49, 50. He made 3 films. And yeah, I mean, just. There's this amazing moment in it, which is probably the premise of the film, and this is not giving away any plot, because this happens within the first couple of minutes.
Yeah.
These 2 guys murder someone. They strangle him with a rope. For fun, effectively, don't they? They do it.
They do.
They do it just because they want to do it. They do it to kill someone for the thrill of it.
Yeah.
And they hide him in a chest, and then they have a party. And at the party, they've got his parents. They've got the guy they've murdered. His parents are there, and his girlfriend is there, who's about to get engaged. His best friend is there, and their old teacher, who's played by James Stewart.
Yeah.
Who is the person who has given them the idea that as they're kind of these intellectual elite, these 2 guys are part of the intellectual elite, they've got a right to kill people that are less intellectually superior to them. Something, and there's also a maid who And just to make it more thrilling, they set the table. They put the body in a chest which isn't locked, and they put a tablecloth over it and set the table and serve food off the chest where the dead body is. And the whole film's filmed in a single camera angle, and there's just this moment when the camera just looks at the chest, and that's all you can see, and all the actors are off stage, and you can just hear them talking, and the maid just starts clearing the stuff off this chest and putting it in the kitchen, and it's a really long.
Yeah.
It's a long thing, and it's quite a long way to the kitchen, and she's doing this whole thing, and you're just sitting there watching it, and then she slowly starts, and there's some books that she's going to put in the chest, and she slowly starts bringing the books over and putting them down next to the chest, and more books, and nobody's noticed, and it's just this amazing moment of tension. It's incredibly tense, and I think it's kind of what I mean about there's people off stage talking, but none of what they're saying is important to the plot. I mean, it's a completely visual thing, and it's just this sort of the difference to me between Hitchcock and Ford. Hitchcock's really using the camera, using what you can't see, because you can't see whether the people know that she's doing this, and like I say, just knowing the timing and getting the timing absolutely right of this really long, kind of 3 or 4 minutes, I think, of nothing other than this woman moving things off this table. We didn't know there was a dead body in this chest would be a very boring scene, but because we know there's a dead body, suddenly it's like stagey. I mean, it's based on a stage play. It's based on a true story, this true story of Leopold and Loeb, who
quite famous,
murdered a kid. I mean, he was a kid that they murdered. In this, it's like they murder an older, somebody their own age. I mean,
sure.
For fun, just to prove they can get away with it. His follow-up film to it was Under Capricorn, which is generally regarded to be one of his worst films.
I've not seen that one.
Have you not?
No.
It's actually pretty good.
Pretty good, right? Okay.
I mean, no, that's not true. He did a few bad films, but there's.
Well, I know what you mean. There's something at least.
Yeah,
even
there's
in
always
the bad
something.
one.
I watched Topaz recently. Actually, I have to say, and there's not very much redeemed. No, there's one shot in it that you kind of everyone talks about, which is incredible, and you sort of go, "Oh my god, he's a genius."
Yeah.
And it's on a par with that kind of John Ford thing of the woman taking her head dropped.
As well, I think it's very good, and just that sort of discipline about the film and the way. Yeah, for a lot of those scenes, there's not much sort of sound, and I think that choice makes a big difference in the suspense and. Yeah,
and I think there's always this thing where a film like that which has got a gimmick, which is the film is all one shot, it's a gimmick. Sometimes the film becomes about the gimmick, but it actually isn't that. It isn't that. It doesn't become. That it's somehow it's part of the fabric of how he's telling this story, and it's. I don't know. For me, that really worked. I mean, in fact, I think there are certainly a lot of. I mean, obviously, he could have cut a bit, but some of those moments where he's just holding the camera and it isn't moving, and you're just watching an actor not even really acting, I mean just clearing a table, but you're building up suspense that way, and it's pretty it's kind of good.
Room Tournament of Champions, which is a horror sequel. Well, the original movie, which funnily enough I reviewed when I was doing the radio show, those days, and I did it for the radio show.
Okay.
It's a bunch of characters in one of these escape type rooms and puzzles and what have you. It actually has quite a fun use of Downtown, the Petula Castle, which is pretty good. But it's not an amazing film. It's sort of just okay. But the sequel gets together a group of these characters who have done these things before, and that's kind of the twist, that they're put in a new sort of challenge, and they have to come up with the answers for these riddles, and at times they don't know exactly where the game starts and where it ends, like what's part of the game, what isn't. So it brings back the two original, like the lead characters from the other movie. They're not quite sure if the plane becomes a simulation as part of the thing, or if it's actually them on the plane. But it's not very good. It's sort
not a good film.
No, it's very generic, very forgettable, sort of cheap, sort of jump scares. The characters are quite annoying. I mean, I do quite like Taylor Russell. I know her from, she was in the Lost in Space reboot on Netflix, and she's very good in that.
This is not the Matt LeBlanc movie.
No.
Okay.
No. They did a series in the last few years. I think it's finished now. There was only 3 seasons, but it was surprisingly good again, for as I said, a mod. But she was in that. She played one of the family members, the Robinsons, and she was so she's in this. She's the lead. It's always good to see her, but no, it's forgettable. It's not the worst thing ever. Some kind of so silly they're entertaining type moments, but it's. You'll forget about it very fast. A rewatch of Fear Street Part 1, 1994. Well, this is on a theme as well, because...
You know a lot more about horror than I do.
Well, yeah, it is one of my areas. Yeah. But this is on a theme because this month, me and my co-host Rachel, we're actually celebrating 3 years since we actually started doing this, reviewing stuff on YouTube.
Okay.
So the reason we decided to watch the first Fear Street movie, because we did it on a stream, and the reason is because the Fear Street trilogy was our very first review, based on the books of R.L. Stein, who of course did Goosebumps. So it's in the same sort of mould. And so they're a trilogy of movies where 1994 is set in 94, obviously. And then the second one is set in the 70s, which is at summer camp. So it's kind of riffing off Friday the 13th type thing. And you've got lots of 70s type bands on the soundtrack. And so it's very sort of nostalgic. And then the third part is... Well, half of the third part is set in around the time of the Salem witch trials.
Oh, right.
Well, because it's a trilogy of movies, and what ties them together is this sort of witch who is the villain of the film.
Okay.
So that's kind of how you get to the Salem stuff.
You've got a Godfather kind of thing, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Godfather 2, I should say. Right?
Yeah, and then the second half of that movie, the final one, is that they go to the present, and that's kind of where the whole thing concludes. Rachel really likes. I mean, she's read the books, or a lot of the books, and so as someone who's a fan of the book, she kind of thinks that, yeah, it's very much in tune to the way the books were. And I rewatched it. I mean, for me, the first time around, it was the weakest one out of the 3. The second one is my favourite personally, but I probably enjoyed it a bit more second time around, I would say. It's solid. I think they cast it very well. It obviously knows what it's doing with the references to 90s horror, and you've got the 90s sort of soundtrack. I mean, the opening is deliberately kind of pastiching the opening to Scream, but it's well cast. There's a likeable group of characters, and it sort of has this, it's a fun horror movie, but also there's something about it where the sort of debates they get into, it does sort of feel like real teenagers having a fight type thing, and it kind of captures that quite well. So yeah, it's a solid enough movie. And I think the trilogy overall works, and I think that's the important thing. There's definitely ups and downs. There's definitely bits that I'm not so keen on. But as a trilogy, it's quite solid. It came out a few years ago. Netflix actually put it out one film at a time, and weekly. So almost a bit like it is a franchise. And I think that worked quite well. It was week after the other. And also that built up a little bit of anticipation because people knew the next one was coming the next week. And so it's, pretty solid stuff, quite enjoyable. It's another frustrating horror. It's called Longlegs.
It's interesting. I almost saw this actually.
Okay.
I was offered free tickets.
Oh, okay.
It just so happened I was actually doing something else that night. I would have gone otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for free tickets, it is worth seeing. Nothing to do with creepy crawlies, and I sort of thought it was, and it was.
Oh, because of the title.
Yeah, because I went in knowing nothing about it. I only knew because I'd heard of the director, because he's a little bit of an indie horror director. Nicolas Cage was in it. I knew Micah Monroe was in it. I knew a few people who were in it. But, so that kind of put me off to start off with, because then you get this super serious Silence of the Lambs style FBI type story. So that threw me off to start. But then there's like a horror twist, and I think that's the problem with the movie, is it tries to do both, and it doesn't really bring them together. It's like it should have made up its mind to do one or the other and kind of run with it, because I think obviously when you have Nicolas Cage in a movie like this, especially a horror movie, because he's developed a reputation for being playing these manic kind of over the top creepy sort of characters. It's along the way, like it's not quite as straightforward as that, but there are twists. But so in a way, if you think of it as a Silence of the Lambs style movie, he is very much
Buffalo Bill.
Yeah. He's very much in that mould, and I sort of found that a little bit distracting. And I think it's just because this film does obviously pale in comparison to that film. But in the other sort of movie, creature feature, kind of like quite... Which is fine, I don't have a problem with that, because once you see what it is, but I think it's that thing of they couldn't make up their mind what they wanted to be. And I think it suffers a bit from what a lot of modern horror suffers from, which is it takes itself a bit too seriously, and it's a bit too trying to be a bit too highbrow and clever, but where it doesn't sort of need to be is that the FBI stuff wasn't very compelling anyway. Like, I think there's a lot of people mumbling, a lot of people...
Sounds a bit like maybe it needed another draft.
Yeah.
The script, it needed a bit of a rewrite, just sort of like...
Yeah.
It's like, it sounds like maybe it was going in one direction and they kind of went, oh, let's go here. And then they should have actually sat down and gone, sounds like, I haven't seen it.
Yeah. It could have been that. It could have been that. But yeah, it's almost like nowadays they call it sort of elevated horror, where it's like...
Oh, okay.
And again, I think... And I won't go too far off topic, but I think it's just this idea that horror movies, they've always had themes in them, and they've always been, as a genre, it's got a very good track record of being progressive and, kind of... So in a way, this stuff has always been a part of horror, but obviously, for the horror movie to work, it still has to work as a horror movie, and it still has to make that stuff work within the horror stuff. So you can't get too kind of fancy going off down other paths and kind of just trying to make it too arty for the sake of it, rather than...
Right.
Obviously someone like Carpenter with like the original Halloween gets that balance, because it's a really well directed movie with great characters.
And strong female.
Yeah. And it's terrifying, and it's a great movie, and all the rest. But it kind of had themes in it. It had ideas to do with like home invasion and kind of how... my co-host says about how it sort of moved horror away from the castles, like the Gothic castles, into like the suburban neighbourhood.
Which I suppose was also what Stephen King did as well.
Yeah.
Had to carry a little bit,
Yeah.
That I think somebody even said that, didn't they? I read that somewhere, that Stephen King set horror in a McDonald's or something,
Yeah.
As opposed to a Gothic castle, yeah.
And also... This has one of my pet peeves in modern movies, especially horror movies,
Go on.
And it's something similar to what I was just saying, but it's got bloody chapter headings. Like, they break it up into chapters. And in a movie, that annoys the hell out of me.
Okay.
Because it's kind of like, if I want to read a book, I'll read a book. Like, the idea of a movie is you go along and you get swept up in it. And it just creates this distance. And again, I mean, obviously in certain films you can do it. Like, I've seen it work fine in some movies. But it just seems a bit too flowery for me, like, just for the sake of it. Because also in this, because you've got this investigation, like, at some point there's a link to, like, hieroglyphics, and they've got, like, hieroglyphics appearing on the screen. It's not a terrible movie. There are some creepy moments in it. There's quite a good twist in it, but the trouble is, after the twist, it kind of gets a bit silly again at the end, and so it's a little bit messy like that. And also, I think Nicolas Cage, in a different movie, if it was a different kind of movie, I would have enjoyed him more. But because it's this sort of movie, it's kind of like, well, you just feel a bit derivative of, like, you know, Buffalo Bill, and it's just...
He's
just became quite annoying a little bit.
He's an odd actor, isn't he? I sometimes find him a bit unwatchable.
Yeah.
Because he's a bit much. And sometimes it works really well, like Raising Arizona or something, for me, works so well.
Yeah.
And I guess Wild at Heart, and sometimes...
He does Unhinged very well.
Yeah, but sometimes it's too much. It's like there's sometimes you kind of go, come on, you know, we would like a little bit of subtlety here, you know, and it... Yeah.
But there is an audience for that, like, because obviously he's become this cult figure. And
he has.
He's obviously happy doing it because it's sort of like, in a way, he's bored with, I think, playing the more Hollywood sort of straight man. I think he does want to.
I mean, he's never really done that though, has he? He's always played. He's always been at this. He's always at 11, isn't he? I mean, you know.
Well, he did a bit because they did make him quite boring when he was in, like, The Weatherman and things like that.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, like Gore Verbinski and.
Okay, he probably did.
And obviously, for a while, he was in, like, Captain Corelli's Mandolin, and that was obviously
that
terrible.
may actually be the worst film ever made. That was such a bad film.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but
you are lucky,
terrible,
because that is 2 hours of my life I will never get back. That actually is one of the worst films I ever saw in my life.
Oh wow, that's a big statement.
No, it really is so bad. It's so bad, and it's not just me that thinks that. It really is. You know. Well, what would I rather watch again, Captain Grazer or The Tourist? And I don't know. I think I might rather gouge my eyes out. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like rather than watch either of them.
Much better. More in the other camp than you like. I agree with you. I think maybe he's taken it to a silly degree where sometimes you would like him to dial it back, and you would like him to maybe just go back to occasionally playing a different kind of role. But, like, I was sort of there for, like, a wacky Nick Cage film, but the trouble is he felt like he was in a different movie, so it didn't quite sort of gel. Quite a lot of hype, and it seems for horror fans it is one of the more hyped horror movies.
I mean, that certainly seems to be getting praised.
And again, maybe that's the expectation, because although I didn't know much about the movie going in, I did know about the hype. I kind of knew that it had been getting a lot of buzz, and so maybe sometimes that's setting you up for disappointment. A pretty underwhelming year so far for horror movies. Like, we've had a lot like that where they've not been bad, but they've just been mediocre and a bit middling, and you know, there's been one or two gems, but then there's been also some quite bad ones.
1922, German silent movie called The Loves of Pharaoh.
Okay.
And this is a historical epic starring Emil Jannings and and Paul Wegener in blackface. So, which is
actually,
Paul Wegener is a German actor, director, most famous for directing and acting in Der Gollum,
Okay.
and he played the Gollum, and but in this he plays an Ethiopian chief. Well,
Well, that's different. Yeah.
Well, it's and on a silent movie club, this.
I do.
Viewers may not know this.
Yeah.
And we've been going for 10 years. Next month,
Yeah, I remember.
It's our
you
10-year
saying.
anniversary. We've been going 10 years. So, COVID, and we got a few re-showings, but not many. I reckon we must have shown about 90 to 100 films. So we are getting to the more obscure films, and this is one. But the main thing I'd say about this, I really enjoyed it, I have to say, and everybody in the audience that came along to this club seemed to really enjoy it. I mean, we can talk about the blackface thing, but the main problem with the film was so much of it was missing. Like about a quarter of the film was missing, and it was filled in with titles. But the trouble is, a lot of the stuff that was missing seemed to be the kind of battle scenes and the kind of the stuff that was really exciting. I mean, it was enjoyable. It was very, very, very melodramatic. Sort of very. It was kind of the pharaoh, the powerful man in Egypt, and he's all powerful. And he's going to marry this Ethiopian chief's daughter and form an alliance. But he falls in love with her Greek slave girl, and basically ends up going to war with the Ethiopians, and and his life is ruined, and and she never loves him anyway, and he just it's all very melodramatic. But and it's great. It's great. I mean, I love silent movies. This is my thing. Particularly my thing. I think. I love movies, but silent movies especially. Area. But so much of it was missing. The thing about the blackface, I was watching it thinking, this is Germany in 1922. I'm guessing there weren't that many black people available, actually. They probably didn't have a lot of choice. Because it's not, it's like you have kind of blackface where it's like taking the piss.
Yeah.
It wasn't that, I don't think. It's
just that they didn't have much of a choice.
They just had a lot of black people in this film. And they didn't have, I'm assuming, they didn't have that many black actors.
Film, and you're representing this other culture, then maybe you just don't do the film then. I think that would be the argument, because...
I suppose it would. I mean, maybe it would. But anyway...
But I get what you're saying.
But this was Ernst Lubitsch, who was a very famous director, famous for directing Ninochka with Garbo. I mean, he went to Hollywood. This was his last German film before he went to Hollywood.
Okay.
I don't know what happened to Paul Wegener, but I know that Emil Jannings stayed and made propaganda for the Nazis. The Blue Angel, which was obviously before, was that pre-war? That was pre-war, wasn't it? When was the Blue Angel? It's quite
was
early.
it like 1929?
It could well have been. Early Marlene Dietrich movie.
Yeah, really.
So I don't know what happened to him after the war.
No.
I assume he didn't really have much of a career, but he was a big, big star, and he was a good actor. I mean, he was a really good actor. He could have gone to Hollywood. It's like he probably could have got. I mean, maybe his accent. I don't know. Maybe he had a. Maybe he had a very strong German accent. I don't know. I don't know what the story is. But anyway, he didn't go to Hollywood, and history tells us he made a bad call. Good fun, a good fun sort of slightly camp, melodramatic epic.
Okay.
It was just a bit of a shame that so much of the film was missing. I mean, it was about a quarter of the film was missing. Probably about 40 minutes or so.
Right, yeah, that is a big chunk.
And and you just basically got stuff with intertitles all the time saying, this is what happens in this. I mean, this is the other thing when you're into silent movies, there's a lot of that happens because these movies haven't survived all the time, and they find bits and pieces here and there, and they do kind of reconstruct the movie. But so that's The Loves of Pharaoh from 1922, I think it was, 22, 23, and it's Ernst Lubitsch.
I've got one more movie to talk about.
And I've got one more movie.
That works.
That works.
No way. So my last one is a rewatch, and again this is on a theme, and this past weekend, me and Rachel watched this on stream. And it's a rewatch of Heathers. And Well, we've got to say R.I.P. Shannon Doherty, because that's the reason we watched it, because she's in it and we were sad about her. And I think this again comes back to partly like memories and youth and nostalgia, because I have a special connection to Shannon Doherty because she was my first TV crush in 90210, the Brenda Walsh character. So I've always... And that was the reason I watched Charmed later on, because that was obviously the show she did after that. This was obviously one of her big early roles, like it was one of her big sort of film roles, and you've obviously got Winona Ryder, Christian Slater in the leads. And so this was a rewatch, but it was the first time I'd seen it in about 5 years, because I remember the last time I watched it was when the Dukes had a screening of it. And it was for the 30th anniversary, because they reissued it on like Blu-ray for that anniversary. Like Blu-ray 4K as well, you know, Arrow sort of put it out. And so that was the last time I saw it. That just gets better with time. Like the more you see it, the more you see how ahead of its time it was, and just how kind of ballsy and sort of smart it was, because it's a very sort of satirical type teen movie, and it's very sort of dark, and like some of the things it portrays, when you think about what would go on later on in the 90s, so when you think of things like Columbine and kind of how high school shootings and things became unfortunately the norm later on, then there's a lot of that sort of thing in Heathers, and it's sort of, it does a fine job of actually being really funny and witty and making you laugh a lot, but at the same time it's really dark. It's like much darker than you expect it to be.
I watched it I can't remember how long, maybe 7-8 years ago, I don't know. I mean, I do remember it is kind of dark. It is, and it is funny. It's you know, it's got that. It's quite self-knowing, isn't it? Sort of.
You sort of guessing what's going to happen with the characters. There's a lot of subversion in it. I think they cast it really well. I think Christian Slater is great. You know, these are the sorts of roles he really comes alive in, and there are sort of layers to his character as well, because when you see like the influence of his father and that, like it paints a picture of why he turned out the way he did. No, I mean obviously I won't give away too much anyway in case people haven't seen it, but like the sort of way it goes is then it does have a very dark ending. I mean, in fact, the original ending was even darker, and in the end they decided not to go quite that far. And we talked about this on stream, and I think we agreed that they went with the right ending in the end, sort of thing, because the message of the film works better with the ending they sort of went with.
I don't know.
But another thing that stands out about it is like the sort of fashion of it and the style and the use of colours. And
when is it? When was it made?
89.
89. Okay.
The use of colours in the movie. There is like a running theme where like the leader of the Heathers kind of has a red sort of hair sort of band, and like
I vaguely remember
there's sort of significance with colours, and the fashions are very distinct and kind of colourful, and it's just very sort of arty the way it's put together, and kind of the music as well. The music has a very sort of dreamlike sort of feel, so it almost feels very surreal and out of time, where it has that almost Lynchian type thing where I think scenes play out in a way which kind of feel pretty authentic. Like you feel like you're in those scenes, and it feels like it's portraying teens in a very authentic way, but then there's just something a little bit offbeat and quirky and out of time about it as well. Like, the music is very good. It does give you a certain sort of vibe about it. Very good performances. I mean, Shannon Doherty is very good. Like, she has quite a big role. and quite an important role when you see how the film ends up going. But and you sort of see why she was a good actress, like in a way why she was, I think, better than kind of, 90210, Charmed, those kind of roles suggest, because it's sort of easy to dismiss it as, okay, they're kind of like light sort of teen style shows, but she was very good. Like, she had a lot of personality, she had a lot of charm. I think she could do that thing of, she could be the sort of cute, bubbly girl next door 1 minute, like the sort of book smart character, but then she could also play more dominating characters as well, and it's almost that thing. I mean, she was in a range of things, but it's that thing of like, she could sort of elevate even stuff that maybe wasn't always the best sort of thing. So it was a good watch. It was a good way to sort of, play tribute to her. And there's also a musical, actually.
Yeah, I know about that, yeah.
I was going to go and see it, but it's stopped playing now. It's frustrating, yeah.
It'll come back.
Hopefully, yeah. Because Rachel says the musical's really good. She's heard the songs, and I think you can watch the musical on streams.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the songs are on Spotify. But...
Yeah. But apparently the musical's good.
Right.
So, Heathers, one good rewatch.
Okay. Well, my last one, then, Lady Vengeance, which is a Korean film.
Yeah. Vengeance trilogy.
Oh, so it's the guy who did Old Boy, anyway.
And that's part of the trilogy.
What's the other one?
Oh, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance.
Okay, I haven't seen that one.
That's the first one.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Murderer. There's a woman went to prison for being a child murderer, looking for vengeance, and because she does seem to be innocent. The magic of editing. We have a dog.
A lovely dog.
So my last film,
Lady Vengeance.
Lady Vengeance. A woman confesses to killing a child, goes to prison, seems to be a false confession that was forced. I don't think I'm giving anything away there.
Okay, carry on.
And then goes out looking for vengeance. And really, that's it. But I got confused because there seemed to be some... And I actually think I need to watch it again, which I wouldn't mind doing. I did enjoy it. Oh, dandy. And by the magic of editing, the dog has gone. She seemed to actually be involved.
Okay.
She did actually seem to be involved in some of the murders, I think, but I wasn't sure. And but yeah, kind of an interesting film because it was very it just had a lot of sort of effects stuff that sort of it would go into dreams, and it had lots of just sort of it was throwing lots of ideas at it in a way that I don't think, if I remember Old Boy, I don't think he did.
Yeah, that's probably a different sort of movie.
Yeah.
Like, you can probably tell it's from the same director and that maybe it's part of this sort of...
Yeah.
There is a link, but yeah, no, I think from what I can remember, Lady Vengeance was a bit more of a stylised sort of
You've seen
movie.
it?
Yeah, I saw it when it came out, so it has been a long time because I saw it once in the cinema and I haven't seen it since. So
I would like to have seen it in the cinema. It struck me as very, very much a sort of film that you would get something more from in a sort of big screen. He did like The Little Drummer Girl, didn't he, on TV?
On TV,
which was very good actually.
And he's recently done another TV series with Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, okay.
It's like a spy one. I haven't seen it yet.
Enjoyed the stylisation of it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is obviously, as we were talking about, you weren't aware that it was part of a trilogy.
No, and I have seen Old Boy, which again I enjoyed. I thought the premise of it was a little silly, but but I enjoyed it as a film, and I loved The Handmaiden. I have to say, I really like The Handmaiden a lot, and I really like Little Drummer Girl. But in a different way, because you're watching a kind of TV show. It's a different sort of vibe, I think.
Yeah, well, especially it was a different genre. Maiden, like, something I really liked about it was I liked that it still felt like one of his films almost. So it kind of felt like it had the kind of provocative, kind of almost sort of edgy bad tasteness of his other films. But it also obviously managed to be like a well done sort of period.
Yeah.
I like that because in a way, if he just played it too straight, it wouldn't have been as good, maybe. Like, it would have lacked
Seems
that.
like you know more about him than I do, really.
Well, I only mean in the... Yeah, I've seen quite a few of his movies, but, like, I mean in the sense of you can sort of tell when you watch The Handmaiden, then it's from the same director as Old Boy. And I like that about it because, you know, sometimes if you play it too straight, if it's just this sort of period drama, it's just not as interesting or, like, exciting.
Lady Vengeance doesn't play it straight at all. I mean, it's very stylised. But, but fundamentally, actually, I mean, there's not an enormous amount, plot-wise, there's not an enormous amount going on, really. But somehow it manages to be really engaging. I'd give it a bit of a thumbs up.
Yeah. I remember maybe enjoying it but not loving it, and I don't know if maybe I went in with quite high expectations because of some of his other movies. I need to kind of rewatch it probably. That you say there's not that much to it, but I think I remember there being quite a lot to keep track of.
Well, yeah, and I think that may be the thing. I think I may have lost track, actually.
Yeah.
And which is why I would quite like to see it. And sometimes you kind of go, well, I just can't be bothered to watch that again.
Yeah.
I didn't understand. I didn't feel that way about this. I did actually think, no, I quite enjoyed that, and I'm happy to. I'm happy to watch it again. To try and see. But there's this sort of thing about the plot that was a bit gaping in my mind. I don't think it's in the film.
Right.
I have to say, I think I just missed it. It's a bit like Traffic. I think it's a bit of a It's a
little bit of a caveat.
45-degree series. It was a series, and I watched most of the second series.
Okay.
But I missed the first episode, and it was Sin, which was on.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it.
I think it was on iPlayer. It's enjoyable. It was very violent, very.
It's
sweary.
set in Ireland, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about an Irish sort of gang, like a family of gangsters, and a kind of turf war sort of thing.
Okay.
And but of course, I didn't 100% understand all the kind of ins and outs because I missed quite a lot.
Yeah,
and it was one of these things I only started watching because my daughter was watching it, and I came home.
Okay.
It was, but then I got a bit hooked, and I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But of course, being TV, it didn't properly end because it got to the end of the series, but it's like you were kind of going, oh, okay, well, there's stuff still to come, so we need another series of it, and probably.
But was it one of those endings where it could be an ending, or was it one where it heavily implied that there would...
No, because it was taking you... Well, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I mean, obviously don't...
It was taking you one way.
Yeah.
It was taking you one way, and it was resolved.
Okay.
But kind of other things got introduced. So this seemed to be the thrust of the series.
Yeah.
That got resolved, but other things got introduced along the way.
Okay.
And some of them were not resolved.
Okay.
And you sort of think, well, that's what the next series is going to be about. And it's would I bother watching the next series? I think probably not, unless my daughter watched it.
Okay.
It would be that, if my daughter came home again from university and watched it,
right,
I would watch it with her, gladly. But
so is it one of these where it's a different story each season, or I mean, obviously you didn't see the first season.
I don't think so.
It follows on, but
I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I've heard.
So I've hit that vague part of my sort of ego. I'm like, I'm just being a bit vague and really.
Yeah. Okay.
No, that's pretty much all I can say. It's very violent. It's very sweary.
Lady in the Lake is the first one. So this is a new... So this started on Friday, and they put up the first 2 episodes. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where after that it's weekly episodes. So you have the first 2, almost like a double premiere. Natalie Portman in her first TV role.
Okay.
And the other lead is Moses Ingram, who's sort of a newcomer. I've not really heard of her before. I think she's been in one or two things, but she's sort of new to me anyway. They're the two leads. So it's set in 1960s Baltimore. It's based on a novel, and the setup is that they're two women from very different backgrounds. So the Natalie Portman character is from quite a rich, like, middle-class sort of Jewish background, whereas the Moses Ingram character is from more of a poor, kind of urban African-American background. So what the series has done so far is, in the past, there's this incident with a Jewish girl who goes missing. In these two stories, so you kind of get the Natalie Portman character, her story, and then you get the other character, Cleo, her name is, her story at the same time. So it's kind of comparing and contrasting these two women, and two women who, because it's the 60s, they both kind of have struggles. They kind of both are taken for granted and sort of resigned to kind of roles. You know, like, it sort of makes a point almost that they are both limited, but maybe in a different sort of way. Like it's almost like in one episode it goes into how the Portman character, in a way, isn't so free to go out on her own, like if she wants to leave her husband and leave her family. And it gets into like her Jewish sort of background and heritage, and how the husband kind of expects her to like cook the meals every night and cook like a Jewish kind of meal. Do that even though this girl has gone missing in the community. And so it kind of jumps between the two sides, and like you sort of get flashbacks, but that's the main setup. There's quite a lot going on with the different characters. So like the Moses Ingram character, you see how she has to work multiple jobs just to provide for her family, because she's got a young son. Her husband is a bit of a layabout, doesn't really do much. And she works in a nightclub. She does the books in a nightclub. But the nightclub is run by this, like, gangster type character. And so I think what the drama is doing is showing how there's always compromise for these women. Like, there's always, like, even when they think there's an opportunity, there's always, like, a drawback or a compromise and a tragic event that's going to happen in the future, which kind of puts them together. So there's a lot of different themes to it, like a lot of different ideas to do with like kind of racism at this time, to do with like Jewish sort of heritage implication. Then the Natalie Portman character and this other character might be lesbians and they become suspects. So it's kind of that idea of like lesbian killers, almost like that's sort of a rumour that's put out by this journalist.
Okay.
So it's kind of tackling these different sort of like themes of the era, because in the same episode there's like a mentally handicapped character who is also linked to the crime.
Yeah.
And he's again, it just sort of portrays how he's handled, about how there's a lack of understanding about that kind of thing at this time. It's okay so far. I think it's solid enough so far. It's not anything that's amazing. I mean, the two leads are very good. Obviously, Portman's very good. It's a very good role for her. I've not seen the other actress in anything, but I think she's very strong in it. You get a good sense of her character in the early episodes and some of the culture around her, because they sort of do things where they sort of link them through things like them, but they're both giving speeches at like a certain event, or they do this thing where there's like her sort of brother is doing like a stand-up routine at home, and she comes home and she kind of turns it around on them, because it's like it's Thanksgiving and the father hasn't done anything. He hasn't. She's been out all day and the father hasn't like cooked.
Okay.
So she kind of does this stand-up routine to kind of mock the fact that he's not done what he's supposed to. But then in another thing that's linked to this, you get Natalie Portman's son doing a similar routine, but he's actually mocking her. So we see how she's a bit of a figure of fun within her own family.
Okay.
Messy, I think they're trying maybe to do a bit too much. And I don't know if it's a pacing issue, like maybe they're trying to cram too much into, like, I mean, so far we've had 2 episodes, so... And again, it comes from a novel, so maybe there's a little bit of, in a novel, this can play out more naturally.
Why is it called The Lady in the Lake?
Because they find a body in the lake, like the Jewish girl making a point, then... because of things like racism and what have you at the time, she's kind of just reduced to her job, her role, you know, a barmaid, you know, what. She's not really known as a person, as a mother. And she has like a voiceover about how, saying about the Natalie Portman character, then you came in at the end of my story. You know, you don't know the whole story. And that's kind of one of the things then it's getting at, is then in death you're sort of stripped of who you were in some ways, you know, because she says in the voiceover, I just became the lady in the lake type thing. I was no longer sort of Cleo. So there's some interesting ideas in there. I think I liked episode 1 more than episode 2. Episode 2 I think did get a bit messy and they were trying to do too much. There were a couple of kind of clunky scenes in episode 2, like some like musical scenes, and there's a scene in a pet store which involves the mentally handicapped guy, which I wasn't so keen on. That was a bit over the top. So I would say I've got mixed feelings so far. I'm reviewing it on the channel, so I'm
you're sticking with it.
Yeah, it's only 7 episodes. So I mean, it's this thing, isn't it? I mean, obviously, if episode 3 is a bit of a dud, then I might leave it. But at the moment, there's enough good things in it to say, yeah, it's worth checking out, and that is what, you know, I mean, there would be an audience for it. Sometimes if you know a show has a bit longer to develop, and you know, you can at least see a promise there, you can see where they can grow the characters and the world, then sometimes I think those shows are a bit more worth sticking with. Whereas if it's a limited series like this, it's only 7 episodes. If it doesn't grab you by about episode 3, then I think that's a good time to kind of tap out. Something a bit different. This is a rewatch. I've been rewatching Seinfeld.
Oh, right.
Which is one of my favourite comedies ever.
Well, I used to watch it in the 90s, I guess.
90s,
when I lived in Archway in London.
Yeah.
I lived with an American girl who kind of introduced me to it. So I think I did watch it right from the off. Because she knew about it. So this is great. Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't watch a lot. I didn't watch it all the time, but what I saw was very funny.
Yeah, no, it has become a favourite of mine, and it's one of these shows. It's similar to what I was just saying in a way. I think it's one of these things where it had a slow start, and it only really became a hit over time. And
is that true?
Yeah, like it almost didn't really make it past the first season, because it was like the first episode was way back in '89, and then there was a gap between episodes because they kind of paused it at like, that's your 1 episode, and then it was one of the producers who funded the other episodes in that season, so they got they got 1 season of 5 episodes out. And then, there was kind of enough to say, okay, carry on. And they carried on. And it was a slow sort of burn hit. Okay. And it basically got better as it went on. And I think there is a charm to watching those early episodes where there's some teething problems. And
I'm actually wondering now whether I did watch it right from the start. I mean, I thought I did.
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny sort of things about one of the early episodes, and this is just one of the sort of little quirks, which is quite funny, but there's a scene when they're in like the video store, and the video store becomes a regular set type thing, but like, and I probably only know this because I heard a commentary on it and they pointed it out in the commentary, but you can actually see them step off the stage like on that video store. So it's like a stage, so there's like a step, and
Right.
Seinfeld literally steps down, so it's obvious that it's a stage.
Oh, right.
And I don't know if they went back and changed that later, so they improved that, or if it's just then you notice it that one time and then don't really notice it sort of thing. But it's one of those, and like the early seasons, the pacing isn't quite there, and you know, I think the early seasons feel a bit too much like every other sitcom, and obviously when Seinfeld became what we now know it to be, it wasn't like every other sitcom. It was very sort of...
Well, it used to start with him doing a stand-up, didn't it?
Yeah. Which, I mean, in itself at the time...
Slightly original, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So where's it on?
And it was sort of... It's on Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all on Netflix. I mean, I've got the box set anyway, but we've been rewatching it.
How many series are there?
There's 9.
Oh.
And it's... But it's very good. It's very consistently good and watchable. And it's one of those you're not really gonna... You know, if you like it, you're not really gonna get bored of it. Like, it is very sort of watchable because the characters are so funny and the catchphrases and... Yeah, I mean, they do a lot of things ahead of their time, because one of the really good early episodes is called The Baby Shower, and they do like a Tarantino style slow motion action scene in like a dream sequence, and
Right.
and again, like for a sitcom in the early 90s, that's pretty like ahead of its time to do that.
I guess it probably was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it even predates like Tarantino, I think, because this is like 91 probably, but like
Well, yeah. When was Reservoir Dogs? Was 90?
92.
Was it 92?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's a coincidence. I'm not suggesting they sort of like were doing that anyway,
Yeah.
but it's just funny looking back when the sitcom did this, and you can kind of say, yeah, that sort of looks like in Tarantino.
And then Tarantino ripped
So-
off Seinfeld.
Yeah.
What are you doing this for? Look at you.
Quiet, I'm trying to get a picture.
But you don't have to do this. The guy is waiting in my house.
Leave me alone.
It's a one-time fee, $150. Why live like this?
I'm not getting illegal cable.
Oh, so what are you going to do? You're going to wait for the cable companies to resolve their dispute? They're going to be in court for years.
Oh, I read in the paper.
Oh, the paper.
Well, they might hook us up again.
Oh, God, you're so naive. All the cable companies care about is the big mamoo.
If I turn on TV, sirens are gonna go off. They're gonna track me down like a dog. I know it.
No, look, now, Jerry, it's no risk. I swear. The Mets have 75 games on cable this year.
Put it in.
You won't regret it. Yeah, Jerry's going to be a cable boy. A cable boy.
Mr. Steinfeld,
Seinfeld.
we're with the FBI. You want to tell us about your cable hookup?
Cable hookup? What about it?
It's been illegally installed, Mr. Steinfeld.
It has? I've been out of town. How did you know?
Hey, Jerry, I had to tell him. I had no choice. They were onto the scam from the very beginning.
Seinfeld, Agent Stone, FBI undercover.
No, Jerry! Cable boy. Cable boy. What have you done to my little cable boy?
But it's so funny. It's so consistent. Like the peak of the show, I think, is season 4 to 7. season 4 was a bit of a turning point, and yeah, no, great characters,
Right.
great comedy.
What Elaine, I gather, was added.
Yes.
So when did she come into it?
Well, it's after episode 1 because...
Oh, so it's quite early on.
Yeah, because there's a different character in episode 1. There's a waitress, and she's only in one episode.
Oh, okay.
And there's sort of differing stories for why she was changed. Like, some people have said she fell out with Larry David, like, because she was ad-libbing, that kind of thing. Other people have said then they just decided they didn't want a main character like that to be a waitress because it would kind of get in the way of things because she would always have to be at work. Although, I don't know about that because they all seem to have jobs anyway, you know, so there's ways around that. I mean, that's sort of part of the thing,
Yeah.
but I can see what they mean, but there's sort of conflicting stories about that, about the reason why this character was then dropped and Elaine came in, and yeah,
Right,
obviously
okay.
Elaine's brilliant, she's electric, she sort of continues the Diane Chambers sort of tradition really in sitcoms, and yeah, she's great. Another Apple TV show, and this time it's a sci-fi show, sort of a quirky low budget sci-fi show, and it's called Sunny. And the reason it's called Sunny is because that's the name of the android in the show.
Okay.
So this one stars Rashida Jones, who people know from Parks and Recreation and The Office. She plays Anne in Parks and Recreation, who's like the best friend of Leslie, the nurse, basically. Okay, never mind. She's Quincy Jones.
People watching it may know.
Oh, I'm sure they would. She's Quincy Jones's daughter, by the way.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So she's the lead, and she's been living in Japan for like a decade. And at the start of the series, she loses her husband and her son in a plane crash. Or seemingly. There's a bit of mystery because at first they can't find the body, so they can't confirm 100% and they were in the plane and that they're dead. So, but it's assumed that they are dead. So because he worked at this tech company, so she's left an android by him, like as part of his work. So it's almost like he's programmed the android to kind of fit perfectly to her like lifestyle.
Right.
So it's getting into these sorts of.
Is it a comedy or is it?
I would say it's a quirky sort of sci-fi comedy with a bit of mystery, because the mystery comes in where there's a backstory to what exactly happened with the husband, because he was like living a double life because she didn't know. Because as far as she knew, he worked in refrigeration. She had no idea he was working with like these robots.
Okay.
So that's part of the mystery. Then he seems to have been living like a secret life. And obviously it's partly this quirky show where she has to tolerate this android called Sunny. And
Does it look like an android or does it look like a person?
No, it looks like an android. I mean, it looks like a small robot. They sort of call it an android in the show, but it's got one of these funny little faces, and it sort of lights up, and
Okay.
like there's this thing where she can tell it when to go to sleep, and you kind of get like the snoring sort of symbols on the
Okay.
thing. But I like it so far. There's only been 3 episodes. Again, they're sort of same as the other show. They release 2 at one, and then it's weekly after that. And this one, I think, is a little bit on the lighter side to the other one I mentioned, and I think this one might be a little bit more up my alley, because I think Rashida Jones is very good. Like, I think she's very good at playing these sort of straight, deadpan sort of characters. Because I think in the comedy she's in, she does tend to play the straight roles more than like the more zany sort of roles, and she's very good. Like, I think you really feel for her character. She's got a good sort of dark sense of humour.
Right.
The mystery itself is kind of so-so, like, that's not necessarily the highlight of the show, but there's some intrigue there, but yeah, I do quite enjoy it just as this quirky kind of low-budget sci-fi with a few modern ideas and pretty good characters and interactions, and, you know, almost this thing of her being lost in translation a little bit, because it's like she discovers a whole different side to her husband and his culture, and then has to deal with, like, his mother-in-law, and it's someone as an outsider almost to the culture.
Right.
But it's, yeah, so far I'm enjoying it. I think the comedy is hitting some of my sweet spots, so enjoyable stuff so far, I would say.
So that's on Apple TV.
Yeah, Apple TV, so weekly episodes.
I'll never see it.
Okay.
Well, I might do.
Very
If it ever comes on some other platform.
Some other, yeah. Also been watching Cobra Kai. So I've watched the first season.
Cobra Kai.
Do you have any idea what it is?
No.
Okay. Well,
It's not a new Star Wars thing, is
no,
it?
no, it's not. It's not. But it's in the Karate Kid universe. Got Johnny Lawrence, who was the original bully in the original movie, and so it's set in.
I've never seen the film.
Okay, no, I know. I remember you saying, but so it's set in modern days, and kind of it follows his life now as kind of, you know, a little bit of a washed up 40-something, where it's kind of like his life hasn't quite panned out how he wanted. He's reflected on the past, and he's reminded of the past because Daniel LaRusso, who was the Karate Kid in the original movies, he kind of shows back up in Johnny's life, and he is in a way his fortunes are sort of like skyrocketed because he's this successful business owner. He owns like a car dealership, and
Right.
it's this thing of like he's almost everywhere Johnny looks. Like he sees him on billboards. He's quite sort of slick, and he's this well-respected like family guy. I was the bully, I was the popular guy, and look at this guy now. It's almost like he's sort of haunting me. Like he beat me all these years ago in this karate championship, and now he's back. He's back in my life, and
Okay.
so it follows the characters, and it basically leads to Johnny opening up Cobra Kai again, which was the name of the dojo in the original movie.
Okay.
And he starts training this kid because he feels sorry for him, because he sees him being bullied. So he starts training him. But he does it under pretense of like, oh, you're pathetic and I just felt bad for you, so this is why I'm just going to show you to be a man. So there's a lot of machismo to it, sort of thing.
Okay.
So I think what they're doing is they're flipping around this idea of this was the villain, this was the bully in the original movie, and now in a way he becomes the protagonist. Like they both do in a way, like, because as things progress, and I've only seen season 1, but LaRusso also reopens a dojo, and he names it after Mr. Miyagi from the original movies. And so it's one of these things, you get their students, you get like Daniel LaRusso has a daughter who kind of gets involved with like one of his students, and it's that kind of thing. And so far it's enjoyable, and I think it's enjoyable because there's just enough of a light touch to it where you actually kind of care about this guy. You actually quite care about the Johnny character.
Right.
It's one of these things where it feels like the same character, but there's just enough of a tweak where you actually quite like him and warm to him.
It's the same actor.
It's the same actor, yeah. The actor's good, actually. Like he does a good job, but
Right.
but it's one of those tricks. Like they do make you think this is the same guy, but he has a little bit more of a morality to him, even though he hides it under all this machismo, and there's some good humour with that stuff, because like they do kind of make it funny, this idea of this guy who's clinging on to the past and can't move with the times. like, there's a funny scene where to try and make money to keep the dojo open, he takes along all this stuff to try and sell to raise money, and one of them is like a Playboy version with Al McPherson in, and it's just that sort of gag where it's like, that's the Playboy he sort of had back in the day, and he thinks he can make money from it now.
Oh, right.
And the guy isn't very impressed because it's like a 1980s sort of Playboy. And he also takes along a dated sort of computer like console, and again the guy sort of poo-poos that. So it's almost this idea of hanging on to nostalgia type thing with these characters, because there's also some funny stuff with him and like his original student. Stop making excuses. Stop, like, you know, you're hiding behind the fact that you've got, like, you make up then you've got asthma, like, you come up with all these phone, and the student's like, well, no, they are real things, basically, I'm not making it up. So it's stuff like that. Easy binge watch, because there's 6 seasons, but each season is only 10 episodes. And
Only? Oh my god.
no, there's not that many, and they're only like half an hour each, that's the thing. So they are... Once again, it just depends on... If you like it, you'll just watch it quite easily, because it's a very light watch. It's not like a hard watch.
Where's it on?
Netflix.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's an easy binge watch. The first season was solid. I think my only thing so far is, like, they introduced these teen characters. And the main teen characters I quite like. And I think they're pretty good actors. But then you've got these other teen characters around them who are like, they're sort of people they know and friends, and it's like, some of their stuff I'm not so keen on, but I can see how they could improve with more seasons, because you can see how they're going to build up these characters and their sort of lives and give them a bit more personality.
But this has all been made already, and
yeah. Well, see, the final season, which is season 6, is coming out this week, basically.
Oh, okay.
So, and this is new to me. I mean, obviously, I knew about the show, and everyone kept saying, yeah, it's much better than you would think, and I think it is for the reasons I've said. It's kind of this thing where, yeah, you can see that coming a mile off. There's a lot of cliches. There's a lot of, like, well, we're just doing this because, like, we've got footage from the original movies. And they actually do that stuff quite well. But it's like, I think it works because they use that stuff to make a point. Like, it's part of the story.
Right.
So it actually works better than you expect it to. Like, I think there's just enough to the characters and the drama to sort of make it work, and yeah, you just sort of go with it, really. It's on YouTube. It's the Ricky Gervais show. I've been rewatching that. So.
Okay. Is this?
It's the animated show with Carl Pilkington.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, this is just one of those things. I used to watch that all the time when I was at university, and it kind of made me... It just kind of kept me going, like, in between studying, I would watch them and
Is it funny? I mean...
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's hilarious. I mean, it's this kind of weird, oddball sense of humour that Carl Pilkington has, where he's a bit of an enigma, because the whole thing about him was that he started out as just a producer on their show. Like, because they were on, like, Extra FM. I used to listen to their radio show. But, like, he was a producer initially. And then along the way, he slowly got worked into the show because he started saying quite funny things.
Yeah,
reacting to them. And I sort of like that about him. Like, there's this cult where he became an accidental celebrity. And... like, there was all this mystery, because he has all these segments like Monkey News and Rockbusters, and comes out with these really silly sort of theories and ideas, and because he plays it so deadpan and you're not quite sure if he's being serious or if he's just playing it up for the comedy. Because I remember when they were doing the shows, like, people actually wrote in, like, speculating them, Ricky and Steven have just invented this guy, then he's just a character they've invented.
He does seem a bit too good to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. But, yeah, this is the animated sort of 22-minute episodes that they've taken from the podcast. And again, it's sort of funny, partly because they're so funny reacting to him and his madness, but also because the animation is very funny as well. The animation adds to, like, the comedy.
Right.
And there's lots of little fun sight gags within the animation. So there's, like, one where they're doing, like, a hostage situation, and it's kind of like they're reenacting it, like, and what would Carl do in the situation to, like, talk him down. And so the Ricky character, or Ricky is playing, like, the hostage character, and they make him look like Hans Gruber from Die Hard in the animation.
Okay.
And they sort of do this thing where he's basically pointing a gun at, like, a broom, and the broom is hidden from sight, so it's behind the curtain. So, like, he's pretending that the broom is a person, like the hostage.
Right.
And obviously they can't see the broom from outside, so it's just little touches like that. It's almost like sight gags, which you wouldn't necessarily think.
Yeah, I don't think I vaguely remember seeing it. I did see a few episodes. And I do remember Carl Pilgrim, I think it was the thing that struck me is you sort of do think, this guy's too good to be true.
Yeah.
He's too much of an idiot to sort of...
But then I think it is sort of funny as well when he does stumble on something that's actually kind of... Yeah, he's actually got a point there, he's right, because, like, in one he sort of says about how he doesn't know why people take pictures of mimes, because in a picture everyone's a mime. So it doesn't really show their skill, because they're not moving anyway, because it's sort of freeze frame. So stuff like that, you think, he's actually got a point about that.
I see what you mean, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's partly, as I said, nostalgia, because I always watched it at uni, and so I can watch them easy. Again, it's an easy sort of binge watch. They're all on YouTube. And the other one I watched, which I've only watched episode 1 of, so I can't really say too much, but this is where the Salem witch stuff comes back in. Because I started watching Soraya Jones Investigating Witch Trials, which is a Channel 4 documentary series.
Okay.
So the actress Soraya Jones is the presenter of this documentary, which looks at different witch trials through history.
Have there been lots?
Well, I mean, there's at least 3 episodes. 3 or 4 episodes. Right. So the first episode, which is the one I watched last night, she's looking at the Pendle witch trials, and
I guess that's the most famous one, isn't it, in England?
Well, yeah, in England, and that's relevant to us because at some point she goes to Lancaster Castle as part of the thing, because they were all obviously they were famously imprisoned there, and there was a trial, and yeah, she has an interest because apparently she was born near Pendle, so it's something which kind of drew her interest. And I think also as an actress she tries to make the point that she's interested in this stuff because of how sometimes witches feel like very stereotypical roles for women, and part of what the documentary goes into is it goes into stuff to do with how even though initially witches weren't gendered, it's kind of like you could have a man witch, you could have a woman witch, they weren't sort of gendered, how it became a negative thing towards women anyway, even though a witch wasn't necessarily a woman at the time anyway.
Right.
So it goes a lot into the sexism, it goes a lot into kind of how it just became accepted, the stereotype, this idea that if you are a practicing witch, then that has to be a negative in the first place. Try and draw parallels and try to link it to modern society. And I know the second episode is going to be the Salem witch trial, which obviously for many is like the big one.
I suppose that is actually more famous. Isn't it?
Yeah, but I know what you mean. For this country, definitely the Pendle. So I think it's okay. I think it's worth checking out. I think it gets a little bit stuffy and academic with some of like the talking heads and like.
That's making it more appealing to me in a way. Not that I'm particularly academic or stuffy, but I hope. But
well, I think that's just my cynicism. It's like come on.
Well, because when you said it, I kind of imagined it being a bit sensationalist, and, the way you described it, but maybe not. The things like broomsticks and stuff.
Yeah.
Something that presumably those kind of jobs were the sort of traditionally the women's jobs.
Yeah.
Sweeping the thing, and so they took the kind of objects that women would have and use, and sort of say, you ride around on that. It wouldn't be. I don't know what men. I'm not sure what men did. It wouldn't be a coal mining axe. I don't know what. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, obviously. Later on, I mean, I'm not sure if it's true of this time, but later on, I guess a male witch would be more like a warlock type thing.
Yeah, I don't really know what
a wizard, maybe. Point then, in a way, the way the printing press took off around this time, and the way you got this hysteria around these women was a bit like the way the internet and Twitter has taken off now. It's almost like.
So this is BBC 4, is it?
Channel 4. So you can watch it online on like the Channel 4 catch-up service.
It sounds quite interesting, actually.
It's worth a look. Yeah, I'd say it's worth a look. It's because it's not really a hard watch.
So it's called?
It's called Soraya Jones Investigating the Witch Trials.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They didn't go for a kind of catchy title.
No, not really, no. Just her name. Maybe they thought her name will pull in some people. It's worth giving it a shot.
Right.
It's obviously not going to take up too much time in your life, because I think it's only like 3 episodes or something.
Well, it's quite interesting. Those kind of things, I think, are interesting inherently. Just odd things that people believe.
Yeah.
You sort of think, well, how could you believe that? It's like, but they do.
They do.
They did, at least, anyway. And some people still do. This kind of weird thing, but.
Yeah, I think that was my only thing. Is I did wonder when I was watching it how relevant this is still to today, and obviously they're trying to make the argument that it is. And she's saying in the documentary things like, well, sometimes as a woman in a room with men, she doesn't know how to act, because it's almost like if she's overly excited and quite, bubbly or whatever, raises her voice, she's criticised for that, because it's like, oh, yeah, that's a bit, you're playing up to a stereotype. But then if she goes the other way, if she goes all serious, then they sort of patronise her and don't take her sort of seriously. It's a bit I thought were quite silly, where I thought they were going a little bit off the point, and it was like, I'm not quite convinced about this, but
yeah,
it is worth watching. There's some interesting things that are raised in it, and yeah, quite an easy one to find, because it's on Channel 4, all 4. Thank you, Ray, for being here. I will put the link in the description to your YouTube channel with some of your work, so if people want to check it out, they can do. And yeah, thanks for listening. Let us know what you've been watching in the comments. Like and subscribe.
Tell us about John Ford.
Support me on Patreon. Tell us about John Ford, and look out, because there's plenty of live streams coming up. We've got quite a lot planned this month and coming into August, so look out for more stuff. But thank you to Ray. We'll definitely have him back on. Take care, guys. We'll see you again soon. Goodbye.